Chapter 2903. Okay, I'll leave this to you. Meng Dong nodded and passed the things in his hands to Barduo. Barduo will lead this trip. Barduo revealed a smug expression. See, he's the one who has gained my trust. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Looking at Barduo's expression, it was clear that he was wholeheartedly working for madness. He even felt a sense of honor. He was already a sky sovereign. How could he have such thoughts? Sky sovereigns were high above. They were above everything, but Barduo was passionate about working for madness. He was even jealous of her. This was unbelievable. Yes, it was like a few sons fighting for favor, trying to please their father. Okay, I wish you success in advance. I'll set up a celebration feast for you and wait for your return, Meng Dong said with a smile. Let's go, genius, Barduo said to Ling Han. Ling Han stepped forward, and when he neared Barduo, he suddenly threw a punch. Peng, firstly, Barduo had not expected that he would suddenly attack, and secondly, Ling Han's strength was much stronger than his, so how could he possibly dodge? He directly fell to the ground, feeling dizzy and disoriented, unable to get up for a while. Ling Han didn't follow up with another attack. Instead, he said calmly, "Watch your words. If it weren't for me, I would have killed you already." Meng Dong wanted to attack, but seeing that Ling Han didn't do anything else, and that Barduo was only beaten to the ground, he gave up on the idea. He said, "Ling Han, we're all on the same side. Don't hurt our friendship." Ling Han chuckled. "As long as no one is being cheap, I won't be aggressive." Barduo finally recovered. He crawled up, and when he heard Ling Han's words, he was instantly enraged. Wasn't this calling him a cheap person right in front of his face? Okay. Meng Le stopped him in time. Go. Don't mess up my plan. The corners of Barduo's mouth twitched slightly, but he did not say anything in the end. Instead, he turned around and left. Ling Han followed behind indifferently. Only after the two of them disappeared did Meng Dong look at the sky and murmur, "Little brother, do you have any ulterior motives? I should be able to test you this time." Ling Han followed Barduo at an unhurried pace. In fact, if Duan Ling Tian were to travel, he would be able to travel through the void quickly because the power in his body could reflect the Devata realms. Unlike Barduo, who could only reflect the fiery frost realm and had to travel in one direction. The void was an extremely complicated space. The shortest distance between 2 points was definitely not a straight line. Zhou Heng should be waiting for them in the frost plain. Previously, when he had slapped Barduo to the ground, he had not done so simply to vent his anger. Rather, he had also seized the opportunity to unleash a wisp of the power of existential plane, forming a clone. However, this clone had been hiding in the ground beneath Barduo all this time. There was a large number of rock sheets here that could block out the divine sense of a heavenly venerate. As long as this clone did not actively expose itself, Meng Dong and Barduo would not be able to find out anything. After Meng Dong left, the doppelganger immediately went to find Zhou Heng and explain the current situation. With the strength of a sixth-step cultivator, it would not be difficult for him to catch up to them. It was not that Ling Han could not deal with Barduo, but he definitely did not have the strength to make Barduo lose consciousness without being able to react. After traveling through the void for a few thousand years, they finally broke through the planar barrier and entered their destination, the fiery frost plane. Boom! Void energy surged out, but the planar force immediately repaired it, cutting off the void storm. This caused a huge impact, causing Ling Han and Barduo to tremble, and they felt as though their bodies were being distorted. Right at this moment, an indescribable mighty force assaulted them. Barduo did not even have time to react before he fainted. Shio! A figure flashed, and Zhou Heng appeared. Ling Han was not surprised. This was because his clone had told Zhou Heng to carry out an ambush here. Another heavenly venerate would definitely not be able to do this. Only Ling Han, who had the power of the Devata plane reflected in his body, could accurately calculate the exit. Moreover, only a powerhouse like Zhou Heng could make Barduo not react at all. After all, this was not as simple as killing him. Ling Han searched out the black sphere from Barduo's body and handed it to Zhou Heng. His figure trembled, and he retracted his planar force. Zhou Heng took the sphere and carefully sensed it. After a while, A solemn expression appeared on his face. There is indeed a frenzied power inside, and it has a strong corrosive effect. If I really throw it into the planar core, it will seriously weaken the fiery frost plane. Senior, can you replicate it? Ling Han asked. He did not want to expose his identity just like this. Thus, the best way was to use a substitution plan and throw the fake thing into the planar core. This way, he could still stay with Meng Dong and the others and spy on their identities. At the same time, he would not weaken the fiery frost plane and help the evildoer. Zhou Heng shook his head. This is a power unique to frenzied power. I can't replicate it. Just as Ling Han was feeling disappointed, Zhou Heng said, however, I will immediately make a trip to the extraterritorial battlefield and ask Master to help. He should be able to dispel the corrosive effect. He was a man of action, and he immediately rushed to the extraterritorial battlefield. Meanwhile, Ling Han sat down on Ba Duo's body and used his own power to suppress Ba Duo. Otherwise, he couldn't injure Ba Duo, and he had to keep him unconscious. How could that be possible? Fortunately, Zhou Heng returned in just over a month. He returned the black sphere to Ling Han. The problem has been solved. Ling Han nodded and placed the black sphere back on Ba Duo's body. Then he tore open space and re-entered the void. He calculated the position and tore open the void again. Xiao, the two of them flew out, and the power of the plane cut through the void storm, causing violent tremors. Ba Duo immediately woke up. His consciousness was still the same as a month ago. Very naturally, he took a step forward and landed firmly on the ground. Ling Han was one step behind him, and he also took a step forward. Ba Duo did not have a shred of doubt. 6 steps had personally acted in order to ensure that he would not sense anything. He strode forward, heading toward the planar core. Just 10 or so days later, they arrived at the planar core. This was actually quite a distance away, and it was impossible to really get close. This was the core of a high-level planar core. Even 6 steps would be killed, let alone a mere 3 steps. Ba Duo took out the black sphere, looked at Ling Han and said, I'm going to throw it away. Ling Han frowned. Don't talk nonsense. Are you asking for a beating? Ba Duo was furious, but he forcefully suppressed it. He raised his right hand and Xiao, this black sphere was thrown toward the planar core. Peng, this black sphere could not get close at all. It was immediately shattered by the huge force around the planar core. However, a black aura moved within it, turning into countless tentacles. End of this chapter. Reading on a phone is more refreshing. Chapter 2905. This wasn't impossible, because he already had the first and second symbols. He could use their resonance to deduce the Empyrean symbol. This was a compulsory course for powerhouses of the 3rd step and above, but it was far too difficult to imagine it. The difficulty for Ling Han was much lower now. Moreover, he also had the experience of repairing an Empyrean symbol. The power of trillions of planes within his body was absolutely more advantageous than any other Empyrean. However, before he went into seclusion, he also heard a lot of news. For example, the primordial gemstone masters were being hunted down, and a large number of them were killed because they were too arrogant before. Now that or masters were trash, which Celestial Venerable would still care. In the past, you actually dared to show disrespect to the Heavenly Venerables, even bossing them around. Didn't they know what kind of existence an Empyrean was? Even the heavens had to respect them. Aside from people like Great Master Xianlai, who knew how to conduct himself and was still living a comfortable life, the group of Origin Gem Masters had suffered a huge blow. It started suddenly, and it ended shockingly quickly. Relying on others to elevate one's status was ultimately not secure. Only one's own strength was real. Ling Han shook his head. He did not take it to heart and went into seclusion. He calmly observed his sea of consciousness. Then he activated the power of tens of thousands of planes within his body. The 2 strings of Celestial Venerable symbols lit up, forming a faint connection. This set was the 9-stream talisman, and the other set was the 8-stream talisman. They were only missing a single symbol in the middle to completely link them together. Ling Han first deduced this symbol. If he could complete this symbol, that set of 9-stream talisman and 1/3 of the 8-stream talisman would be able to add a terrifying amount of power. The boundless power of the plane in his body shone, causing his sea of consciousness to seem to transform into the void, illuminating the heavens. Streaks of primal chaos energy gushed out from every single cell in his body, forming a vast ocean around him. Every single streak of primal chaos energy was incomparably heavy. If not for his existence, a single streak of primal chaos energy would be enough to destroy a low-level plane. His mind was clear, but his enlightenment was as resplendent as fireworks. It was as if he could see the birth and development of an entire origin world. The 6 essential strengths were the foundation, everything, and the Empyrean symbol was a tool that could communicate with the essential strengths. After who knew how many years passed, Ling Han's body trembled, and his eyes snapped open. There were no whites or blackness in his eyes, only chaos and a strange aura. He wasn't an Empyrean, but he wasn't any weaker than one. He shook again and woke up from this strange state. His face lit up with joy. He had finally deduced the first 8th grade symbol, and it glowed in his sea of consciousness. Come, my low-level combination symbol. 144 symbols revolved at the same time. At first, Ling Han was filled with anticipation, but then a look of surprise appeared on his face. His strength had increased by 262 times. Something wasn't right. His 8th-rate rune combination could already increase his strength by 257 times. If he were to combine it with a complete 9th-rate rune, the increase in strength would definitely exceed 300 times. Why is it so little? This was because the 9th-stream talisman couldn't be combined with the 8th-stream talisman. It was just like when you revolved the Empyrean runes that were unrelated to each other. No matter how many there were, you could only use the strongest of them. In Ling Han's hands, this was the strongest combination of symbols. Strange, the Empyrean symbol that he had deduced was definitely correct. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to increase the power of the 8th-stream talisman. But why couldn't it be combined with the 9th-stream talisman? Could it be that he needed a complete 8th-stream talisman? Ling Han decided to continue deducing. He only needed 2, and they could resonate with neighboring Empyrean runes, so the difficulty of deducing wasn't too high. He went into seclusion once more. Time flew by, and after who knew how many years, Ling Han comprehended the second 8th-rate rune. He connected the original 2 sets of 8th-rate runes, and the increase in strength suddenly broke through 400 times. He didn't stop and continued deducing the last 8th-stream talisman. Time was already meaningless to him. Countless years passed, and Ling Han woke up for the 3rd time. 8th-stream talisman, Qi. Ling Han couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. It should be enough this time, right? He revolved all the 9th-stream and 8th-stream talismans. 1. The 222 Empyrean runes all lit up. Pung! The chamber he was in for seclusion instantly exploded. A terrifying power soared into the sky, breaking through the seal of this plane and piercing into the void. So many years had passed, and there weren't many people left here anymore. But there were still some people who hoped to get lucky and continued to explore. Perhaps there might be some origin stones left behind. But at this moment, everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Looking at that pillar of light that soared into the heavens, everyone below the Empyrean level knelt down. Even the Empyreans' hearts were beating wildly. The runes in their bodies automatically revolved, cheering and jumping for joy as if they wanted to submit to that pillar of light. A complete Empyrean symbol that surpassed a 1st-stream talisman was too terrifying. Yet there was no joy on Ling Han's face, because he discovered that the 2 sets of Empyrean symbols couldn't be used together. His strength had increased to an astonishing 999 times, but this was the might of the 8th-stream talisman. The 9th-stream talisman didn't have any effect at all. Strange. He had clearly gathered all the 8th-stream talisman, so why couldn't he combine them with the 9th-stream talisman? Was it because he couldn't combine them at all, or did he need to gather all the Empyrean symbols before it could take effect? If it was the former, then there was no need to mention it. And if it was the latter, then the time needed would be incomparably long, and it might even be impossible to complete it in a day. Ling Han stopped the circulation of the Empyrean symbols and slowly nodded. It looked like it wasn't just because they had different amplification effects, but also because they each had their own special characteristics and could only be divided in this way. Look, the 8th stream talisman was adjacent to the 9th stream talisman. They could resonate and sense each other, but couldn't be used together. There was nothing that Ling Han was dissatisfied with. He now had a complete 8th stream talisman, and his strength could be amplified by close to 1,000 times. This was too terrifying. Even if he encountered Xen Chihu again, he was confident that he would be able to fight to his heart's content. It's time to go out and take a look. He came out of seclusion, and the Empress and the others were already waiting for him, and the time they had waited had shockingly reached 30 billion years. Ling Han couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't seem to have spent that much time, so how could it have been 30 billion years? Return to the fiery frost plain, the Empress said gently. Did everyone else go back? Ling Han asked. Yes, second brother, Jianxue, and the others have already gone back. The Empress nodded. After 30 billion years, her cultivation level had also reached the late stage of the 3rd step. This speed could already be considered fast. After all, there was no longer any supply of great medicines. All right, let's go back too. Ling Han stretched out his hand and stored all the women into the celestial visitor house. Then he began to travel through the void. More than 10 years later, he returned to the fire frost plain. Immediately, he received a signal from Mengdong. End of chapter. Chapter 2906. Mengdong really should be looking for him. When he completed the mission, there should have been a celebration party waiting for him, but he was either busy mining or in seclusion for a long time. It was impossible for Mengdong to find him. Now that he had returned to the Firefrost Plain, the other party had finally arrived. Ling Han also sent a signal in response to Mengdong. After a while, Mengdong arrived. You really made it hard for me to find you. Mengdong shook his head. After 30 billion years, he had already taken 4 steps. This speed was amazing. Even if it was not as fast as Xian Chihu and the others, it could be said to be rare. After all, in a sense, he was a creation of chaos. He believed that Lu Xie, Ba Duo, and the others had also reached 4 steps. Ling Han couldn't help but think of himself. After more than 30 billion years, he had only advanced a little. If the middle stage of 3 steps to the late stage was divided into 100 steps, then he had taken about 10 steps, or at most 12 steps. At this speed, if he wanted to reach the peak of 3 steps, it would really take an epoch. He sighed in his heart. Without the support of medicine, without the life essence of a celestial venerate to refine, his cultivation speed was really slow. And this was because he had obtained more than 200 celestial venerate symbols, which increased his cultivation speed by nearly 1,000 times. Otherwise, how slow would it be? 1,000 epochs to advance 1 step? Ling Han didn't dare to think about it. If that was really the case, he would have to cultivate for a long time to reach 7 steps. He naturally didn't show it on his face. He nodded. I have been in seclusion all this time, so I didn't have time to care about anything. Come, let me introduce you to some brothers and sisters. Mengdong smiled and didn't waste any time on the previous topic. Ling Han agreed. This was exactly what he wanted. Although Mengdong had already advanced 4 steps, Ling Han did not take it to heart. Though his cultivation advanced slowly, it was only his cultivation level that was slow. His power was still increasing at a terrifying rate, especially now that he possessed a complete set of 8th-rate symbols, which increased his power by almost 1,000 times. Who was he afraid of? Mengdong led the way in front, while Ling Han followed behind. After walking for several days, they arrived at a mountain range and then entered a cave. It actually had a powerful divine sense isolation effect. He looked carefully and saw that the walls of the cave were covered with heavenly venerable stone skin. These people were really careful. With these stone plates to isolate the senses of an Empyrean, even the 7 steps return might not be able to discover them. Not long after, the 2 of them arrived at a huge underground cavern. The space was huge, as if another world had appeared here. Mengdong. There were 6 people there, either standing or sitting cross-legged. When they saw Meng Dong, they all called out to him. Ling Han swept a glance over them. He recognized 2 of them, and they were naturally Lu Xie and Ba Duo. As for the other 4, he didn't recognize them at all. However, they were all at the 4th step, and no matter where they were placed, this combination could be said to be very powerful. Come, let's get to know each other. This is Ling Han, our last awakened brother. Meng Dong patted Ling Han's shoulder. Ling Han nodded at these people. I've been waiting for a long time. I finally meet you all. Back then, he had seen Frenzy shoot out hundreds of light spots. Although most of them had been annihilated in the void, there were still about 100 that had entered various planes. Even if only half of them had grown up, there should be about 50 of them now. It was far more than this number. The 4 people that he did not know also introduced themselves. They were Luo Ming, Yang Ke, Wu Junyi, and Xiaoying. All of them were very arrogant. This was a sense of superiority in terms of realms. Ling Han, I heard that your ability to fight above your level is very powerful. I want to spar with you, Xiaoying said. They were so hostile that they wanted to challenge him right from the start. Ling Han glanced at Ba Duo. This guy was also full of fighting spirit. Clearly, he thought that he had reached a higher level and was qualified to challenge him. Sure. He nodded, appearing very indifferent. Unless his opponent was Xan Chihu, it was really hard for him to be interested. His perfunctory attitude naturally made Xiaoying very unhappy, but he did not say anything. He only revealed a cold smile at the corner of his mouth. Strength was not something to be boasted about. It was something to be fought. Let's fight. He rose into the air. The space here was very large. As long as he controlled it, he could definitely let celestial venerables fight. Ling Han stepped into the sky step by step. He put his left hand behind his back and then hooked his right hand. Make your move. Xiaoying was even more unhappy. How much did he look down on him? He let out a long roar and charged towards Ling Han. He turned his hands into hammers and smashed them towards Ling Han. To be able to be chosen by Frenzy, all of them were super geniuses. Even if they were at the 4th step, they would have a certain ability to fight above their level. For example, Xiaoying was only at the early stage of the 4th step, but his battle prowess had reached the peak of the 4th step. It was really shocking. It was unknown if this guy had nurtured a small world in his body or if he had collected a lot of plane power. Before reaching the 6th step, there was actually not much difference. The more plane power he collected, the stronger the power of a small world. However, if he only collected a dozen or 20 plane power, the power of the small world would quickly surpass him. Ling Han appeared very calm. When Xiaoying's fist arrived, he only returned the favor. The power of his fist was too terrifying. As he punched out, endless chaotic aura surged, and the power of Xiaoying's punch was instantly shattered. However, Ling Han did not take advantage of his victory to continue his attack. Instead, he promptly retracted the power of his fist and smiled calmly at Xiaoying. The more polite he appeared, the angrier Xiaoying became. This was because in Xiaoying's eyes, this was simply blatant disregard. Xiaoying roared. Wang, he had already activated a celestial venerable symbol. Instantly, it was as if he had transformed into a god, exuding a great aura that could suppress the heavens. First-rate symbol. He shook his hands again. Both his arms turned purple gold, and strange patterns appeared on them. He charged out, waving his arms and sweeping them towards Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand to receive it. Peng, he felt his arm shake, and actually felt as if it was about to break. Celestial venerables were tempered by intrinsic power. When they reached the 7th step, they would be like the devouring metal body that had reached the great success stage, and they would be indestructible. But before reaching the 7th step, they absolutely could not compare to the devouring metal body. But Xiaoying's arm gave Ling Han a feeling that it was simply a celestial venerable treasure. If he could cultivate his physique to such a level at the 4th step, then besides those at the 7th step, could anyone else hurt him? Impossible. Ling Han immediately shook his head. He brushed his hand to dispel the numbness in his arm. Then he suddenly said, "You have refined the devouring metal body into your body." No wonder your arm is so strong. It's not just my arm. Xiao Ying sneered. His figure lunged out, attacking fiercely at Ling Han. Ancient patterns appeared on every part of his body. The end of this chapter. Chapter 2907. A beautiful romance. Not only his arms, but every part of Xiao Ying's body had been fused with devouring metal, making his physique incomparably tyrannical. He was unbridled, attacking wildly at Ling Han. This idea was very simple, but even a sixth-step Empyrean would not be able to do this. It seemed that because of his frenzy, he had such a strange ability. Ling Han's strength naturally far surpassed Xiao Ying's. With a casual attack, he sent Xiao Ying flying. There was no need for direct contact at all. Under the suppression of strength, it was too easy. It was like an ordinary person punching a rock. Not only would they not be able to break the rock, but they would also injure their own fist. However, if they wanted to throw this rock out, it was a simple matter. Xiao Ying laughed loudly. Is that all you have? Although he was constantly sent flying by Ling Han, he was not injured. Ling Han was speechless. Whose realm was higher? You were beaten like a sandbag by me, but you still had a smug look. Where did this sense of superiority come from? Ling Han wanted to ridicule you, but he didn't know where to start. We're all family. There's no need to fight seriously. Meng Dong tried to mediate. That's right. Lu Xie also agreed. Everyone was trying to mediate, so Ling Han and Xiao Ying naturally could not fight. Let's fight next time. Xiao Ying was full of fighting spirit. Whatever, Ling Han said indifferently. Come, let's drink. Meng Dong said with a smile. He called out to everyone. The 8 of them sat down and began to drink. All creations in this world were the result of regulations, and this was also the case for Celestial King tier great medicines. Thus, there was no wine that could make a heavenly venerable drunk, and they wouldn't be affected at all right? But when Ling Han took a sip of this wine, he actually felt a sense of dizziness. He was a little strange. Surprised, right? Meng Dong said with a smile. This is wine made from peerless great medicines. Of course it will affect Empyreans. So that was how it was. Ling Han chuckled and continued to taste the wine, but he did not swallow it. These people were all Frenzy's subordinates. Even if he had already fought his way into the enemy's territory, he still had to be careful. After all, even if these 7 people did not intend to harm him, if they had anything to do with Frenzy, then he could eat them. He only swallowed a little bit of the wine, and the planar power in his body immediately began to circulate wildly, grinding away the wine's power. Immediately, the dizziness disappeared, and the wine turned into some extremely pure power, increasing his cultivation. Ling Han wasn't sure if this wine was made from a peerless medicine, but it was definitely effective in raising one's cultivation. Seeing that the dimensional power in his body was so powerful, Ling Han no longer held back and began to drink in large mouthfuls. The power in his body surged violently, causing him to feel extremely comfortable. Drink. Meng Dong and the others also frequently toasted. Brother, you and Ba Duo made a great contribution last time, and we never had a celebration feast for you. This time, it's both a welcome ceremony and a celebration feast for you, little brother. Everyone urged him to drink, and Ling Han did not refuse. Very soon he appeared to be drunk. Meng Dong and the others persuaded him, and their mouths curled into cold smiles. Little brother, you really disappoint us, Lu Xie suddenly said. What do you mean? Ling Han shook his head. Do you really think that after tampering with my things, I will not have any awareness at all? Meng Dong said coldly. Ling Han was shocked. Frenzy actually knew that its things had been tampered with, and could no longer corrode the Firefrost plane? That was impossible. It had to be known that they were separated by a plane. How could Frenzy sense it? It was actually unreliable to say that the Firefrost plane had not been affected, and that was why Frenzy had seen through the flaws. Even if a plane was weakened, it would still take epochs for it to manifest. What was a mere 30 billion years? It seemed that he had really underestimated Frenzy's ability. In other words, he had not passed Frenzy's loyalty test, and now he was going to be the target of a reckoning. he said in an unclear tone. Nonsense, you are completely slandering me. Ha, even at this time, you still want to quibble, Lucia said coldly. Don't talk nonsense with him, just kill him. Barduo shouted. He hated Ling Han the most. Back then, he had been smashed to the ground by Ling Han with one punch, which had been a great humiliation to him. Meng Dong waved his hand. There's no hurry. This wine has a trace of my true power. Even if our little brother's strength is heaven-defying, he still can't match it. But little brother, don't worry, this true power will not harm your body at all. Instead, it will greatly improve your cultivation. It's just that. You will sleep for a long time, that's all. Barduo could not help but interrupt. I know you are strong, so just to be safe, I even used my true power on you. You are really lucky. Luo Ming smiled insincerely. They were not reluctant, because they all had the ability to absorb the life essence of a celestial venerable and transform it into their own cultivation. So, after Ling Han absorbed their true power, as long as they killed him, they could still return it to their own bodies. Of course, there would definitely be some losses, but to be able to get rid of a heaven-defying traitor like Ling Han, this price was naturally worth it. They were not in a hurry. Ling Han was only drunk now, but very soon he would directly fall asleep. Then, it would be even easier to deal with him. The seven of them looked at Ling Han with mocking expressions, looking forward to seeing Ling Han reveal an expression of anger, unwillingness, and helplessness. This would open up all the pores on their bodies. But Ling Han's next action made the corners of their mouths twitch, because he stretched out his hand, snatched the wine pot, and directly gulped it down. Fuck, did he not want to faint to death fast enough? Meng Dong and the others were speechless. How could there be such a person? Was his brain not working well, or was he going to break a jar and get himself drunk to death? Snatch it! Meng Dong was the first to react. Ling Han had already drunk enough wine, and giving him more was a waste. Because even if they could refine Ling Han's life essence, there was a problem with the conversion rate, and there would be losses. The seven of them hurriedly moved to snatch the wine pot. However, even though Ling Han appeared to be drunk and swaying his head, looking as if he would collapse at any moment, it was precisely because he was swaying here and there that he managed to evade all the attacks from the seven of them. At the same time, he was also gulping down large mouthfuls of wine. Meng Dong and the others were so anxious that their eyes turned red. Every time Ling Han drank an extra mouthful, that was a huge waste. They had not been pained before, but that was the price they had to pay in order to take down Ling Han, but now it was not the case. Quickly put down the wine pot. Meng Dong roared, not stopping his attacks. Ling Han said vaguely, Why should I put it down? Who do you think you are? Grandpa just wants to drink to his heart's content. End of this chapter. Chapter 2909. A Beautiful Romance. Meng Dong's group of 5 fused together, transforming into a miniature version of madness. Shwa, shwa, shwa. Its entire body was covered in tentacles, and like whips, it lashed out one after another with astonishing momentum. It had a first-rank talisman, and its body was a fusion of 5 people, so its strength naturally increased explosively. At the cost of a celestial venerable's endless lifespan, its strength had increased at an inconceivable rate. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The tentacles lashed out one after another, bringing with them endless darkness and evil. To this space, it was like a calamity. Ling Han also used a first-rank talisman, and then he fought the fusion monster head-on. Bang bang bang. In the intense battle, the two sides actually fought to a draw. Ling Han was secretly shocked. It had to be known that 5 fourth-step cultivators working together, even if all of them were at the peak of 4th step, would not be able to push their strength to 5th step. However, not only had these 5 people done it, but they had also reached the middle stage of 5th step, and they were not the slightest bit weaker than him. As expected of madness creation, it had all kinds of abilities. Ling Han, you only have a first-rank talisman, and you can only last for 2 hours. Let's see how you can still fight me at that time, the fusion monster roared. Ling Han smiled faintly. Don't be happy too early. He wanted to see what kind of ability madness creation had, so he did not push his battle strength to the limit. Instead, he calmly exchanged punches and kicks with the other party. However, after 2 hours, the fusion monster still did not have any new moves, which made him very disappointed. "Your time of death has come." Meng Dong's fusion monster shouted loudly. It activated another celestial venerable talisman. This was also a first-rank talisman, and it increased its strength by more than 80 times, allowing its battle strength to remain the same. What about Ling Han? He only had a first-rank talisman, and it would be gone after it released its power. Die! The fusion monster opened its huge mouth, and instantly, countless weapons surged out, transforming into raindrops that slashed at Ling Han. Now, this secret technique was unleashed with 5th step battle strength, and with the first-rank talisman that increased its strength by more than 80 times, its power was incomparably terrifying. Ling Han shook his head, and all of the second-rank talismans lit up at the same time, illuminating the heavens within his body. Boom! His strength soared by 1,000 times. Bam! He simply threw out a punch, but the weapons in front of him were all shattered at the same time. However, the power of the punch did not diminish at all. It continued to surge forward at an incredible speed. The fusion body didn't even have time to react before a large hole was blasted open in his chest. Black blood gushed out uncontrollably. It wanted to speak, but not a single word came out. Pa, pa, pa. The tentacles on its body fell off one by one, followed by its flesh and blood. Very quickly, it scattered into a bloody pulp on the ground. Under Ling Han's punch, its entire body had already collapsed. That was a 1,000-fold increase in strength. At the 5th step level, he would definitely be able to kill anyone he saw and kill gods he saw. However, the fused divine soul did not dissipate immediately. Instead, it turned into a final wave of attack that surged towards Ling Han. The speed of this attack was too fast. By the time Ling Han reacted, this attack had already rushed into his sea of consciousness, wanting to wreak havoc and destroy his will. However, there was no need for him to actively circulate it. The power of the trillions of planes in his body circulated in unison, turning into numerous millstones that could crush anything. This shock wave of divine sense was very strong. It was originally enough to pierce through the sea of consciousness of a 5th step, but with the crushing of the millstones, the shock wave was split into millions of tiny fragments. Then they were all shattered, no longer posing any threat. Meng Dong and the others howled in indignation, yet they were unable to reverse the fate that was already decided. They all dissipated one after another. Ling Han made a move, wanting to capture their remnant souls. However, a black shadow rose up from their blood and transformed into a frenzy. However, its size was even smaller, only the size of a fist. However, the aura it exuded was incomparably terrifying. Even Ling Han could not help but stop in his tracks and stop. This still could not possibly be the main body of frenzy. However, it was extremely likely that it was a projection doppelganger that had temporarily descended with the help of the blood essence of Meng Dong and the others. Frenzy did not make a move. It only stared at Ling Han, waving its countless tentacles. Boom, it suddenly collapsed, dissipating into the air. Only then did Ling Han breathe a sigh of relief. Facing this number 1 vicious creature of all times, it would be strange if he was not nervous. Not good, I've been tricked. He suddenly reacted. He stretched out a hand to grab, but grabbed nothing, because the remnant souls of Meng Dong and the others had already completely disappeared. Only then did he realize why Frenzy's doppelganger had not made a move. That was because it was impossible for the other party to make a move. It was just an empty shell, and that had frightened it. And why had it done that? Naturally, it was to prevent him from seizing the divine souls of Meng Dong and the others and reading the secrets on their bodies, including the heavenly venerate symbols, as well as the identity information of the other survivors. Ling Han bared his teeth. It had always been him who scared others. He had not expected that this time he would be made a fool of by Frenzy. He felt extremely regretful. Originally, he could have obtained 5 more first-rate symbols. 5, a whole 5. Moreover, these 5 people actually did not contribute a single bit of life essence. Is this because of the influence of Frenzy's consciousness, or is it because these 5 people fused together? Forget it. In any case, I've obtained 2. Moreover, I should be able to read the information of the other survivors from these 2 people. Ling Han began to refine the remnant souls of Xiao Ying and the others, extracting the things he needed from them. As for the heavenly venerate symbols, it went smoothly. Very soon he obtained 2 first-rate symbols. In addition, there were a number of 9th-rate, 8th-rate, and so on. The duplicates were all separated by him and sealed in the heavenly venerate stone. However, as for the list of survivors, Ling Han was somewhat speechless. This was because the lists obtained from the 2 people were actually completely different. Moreover, there were as many as 200 people on each list, including Zhou Heng and Chu Hao. All of them had become traitors. Of course, this was something that was impossible. In other words, these people had actually long since made preparations for this. Even if they died, it was impossible for others to obtain any truly useful information when searching their souls. If they were hunted according to these 2 lists, perhaps there would really be a few frenzies who had committed crimes, but the majority would be innocent people. At that time, the whole world would be in chaos, and the group of heavenly venerates would also wither to an unbelievable extent. Ling Han shook his head. He also separated Xiao Ying and Ba Duo's first-rate symbols. He was now strong enough, but the Empress and Hu Niu lacked high-level heavenly venerate symbols. Thus, he planned to let the 2 girls master these 2 symbols. The 2 girls came out of the celestial visitor residence. After hearing what Ling Han had said, they did not stand on ceremony, and each took 1 heavenly venerate symbol. Then, they continued to enter the celestial visitor residence to cultivate in seclusion. Ling Han set out again, and went to find Zhou Heng and the others. End of this chapter. A perfect anti-theft chapter. Please use the search engine to search for the keywords, and you can read all kinds of novels. Chapter 2910. After so many years, most of the celestial venerables had returned to the frosty plain and continued to do what they were doing. However, the general situation had stabilized before, and the strength of each force was about the same. Very few forces took the initiative to start a war, because this might allow a third party to benefit from it. The whole world was not peaceful now, but there were basically no large-scale wars. It was as if they had come to a flourishing age of martial art. Although the competition was extremely fierce, the overall environment was good. Ling Han returned to the Lin family's ancestral land and asked Lin Xiaoyang and the others. He told them about the previous situation, which surprised Lin Xiaoyang and the others. Frenzy's creation can actually combine. There has never been such a situation before. This should be a special case. Otherwise, we should have seen it long ago in the extraterritorial battlefield. Yes, even with Frenzy's methods, he has only cultivated over 100 people after so many years. This should not be enough to cause a disaster. After the 3 6-step elites discussed seriously, they felt that there was no need to be too vigilant. When they heard that they were also remnants of Frenzy, they couldn't help but laugh. This Frenzy really played a trick of sowing discord. Ling Han talked for a long time with the 3 of them. The 3 elites were very gentle and encouraged him, looking forward to his future achievements. He left and returned to his own Ling city. The large black dog, heavenly venerable original birth, Ji Wuming, and the others had returned long ago. Their strength had improved greatly. After all, there were too many fortunes in that lost plane. For example, Ji Wuming and Fire Hibiscus had already rushed to the 3rd step, and even the large black dog had reached the 2nd step. This made Ling Han feel that the heavens were blind. What heavens? Grandpa Dog should be born wise and mighty, and dictate the world. The large black dog boasted shamelessly. If the heavens are not in my favor, Grandpa Dog will slaughter the heavens. In the end, Ling Han kicked him into a ditch. The current situation was very harmonious. Everyone cultivated, and when they were bored, they would discuss martial art. It seemed that the world was really peaceful. However, not long after, someone came to make trouble. This was a 6th-step Empyrean, Yu Qingwang's father, Yu Borong. Back then, Yu Qingwang had died at the hands of Ling Han. After Yu Borong learned of this, he would definitely want to capture Ling Han and kill him as a sacrifice. It was just that back then, everyone had been searching for primordial stone veins. This was too important. An expert like Yu Borong was able to pick up and let go. Naturally, he knew which to place first. Moreover, it was extremely difficult to find a person in that plane, so Yu Furong naturally wouldn't waste her time. Now that the situation was set, Yu Borong had a lot of time, so she naturally wanted to avenge her son. However, Zhou Heng and the other two were full of expectations for Ling Han. How could they hand him over? Yu Borong was extremely domineering. He threatened that if the three of them did not hand over Ling Han, a war would be unavoidable. Since Zhou Heng and the other two were able to reach the sixth step, they must have been through a lot. How could they be frightened by such a threat? They were fearless. If you want to fight, then we'll give you a war. As soon as the two sides clashed, they each summoned a large number of people to confront each other at the outermost periphery of the Lin family's ancestral land. But just as the battle erupted, the sixth step experts on both sides all pricked up their ears to listen. After a long time, they all looked shocked. "Go back," Yu Borong immediately said. He waved his hand, and the people under his command immediately retreated like the tide. Why did they suddenly stop fighting? Ling Han naturally couldn't stay out of this. He had been standing on the side all this time, and now he was also very dumbfounded. The battle had already been so fierce, and the important figures of both sides were just missing a wave of their hands. Then, a bloody battle would ensue. But now they had actually retreated? How strange. Lin Xiaoyang said in a booming voice, "I just received a message from a seventh-step supremacy. The energy storm in the extraterritorial battlefield is quickly dissipating, and it is very likely that it will stabilize within 1 billion years." What? When everyone heard this, they all turned pale with fright. The extraterritorial battlefield was about to reopen? Didn't they say that the energy storm would last for an endless amount of time? Why did they suddenly say that it would disappear within 1 billion years? Don't think that 1 billion years was very long. To a celestial venerable, they might not even be able to advance a small step. Based on this, 1 billion years was really very short. Moreover, once the energy storm passed, the Frenzy army would definitely make a comeback. They had to immediately build up the city's defenses. Otherwise, if they had to face the Frenzy army that had accumulated strength for hundreds of billions of years, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. But how was this possible? Back then, when the energy storm had swept, even the seventh-step supremacy was certain. This kind of situation was very likely to continue forever. But how long had it been now? Not even 1/100th of an era had passed. Everyone was at a loss. Did they have to go back to face that terrifying Frenzy army again? This made many people feel at a loss, and they started to hate war. There was a saying that it was easy to be extravagant from frugality, but it was difficult to be extravagant from extravagance. Similarly, how many people would still be as firm as iron when they were used to ease and comfort and had to throw themselves into that bloody and cruel war? But what could they do? Everyone knew that as long as Frenzy successfully invaded, only death awaited them. Many people started to suspect whether the energy storm back then was a conspiracy created by Frenzy to make them accustomed to ease and comfort, to destroy their fighting spirit, and even to make them kill each other, greatly weakening their strength. Zhou Heng and the other two naturally had such a guess. It was just that they didn't expect this day to come so quickly. They originally thought that there would be a buffer period of 1 or 2 eras. Fortunately, the discovery of the ancient plane had made the surviving heavenly venerables a lot stronger. This was good news. But at the same time, there was also bad news, extremely bad news. After so many years of killing each other, the idea that others were unreliable had been planted in the hearts of the heavenly venerables. How could they still trust their comrades and entrust their backs to others? But no matter what, this was a war that they had to face. All the sixth-step powerhouses took action, bringing the remaining heavenly venerables to the foreign battlefield. As expected, the energy storm was quickly dissipating, like a receding tide. Even though this battlefield was incomparably huge, if both sides were to recede at the same time, in fact, it would only take about 1 billion years for the energy storm to completely disappear. At that time, they would be able to see Frenzy's army charging over from the other side. Advance. We have to set up a front line as much as possible. As the energy storm receded, they advanced. Soon, they arrived at the overlapping space. In the past, this place was divided into 8 levels, corresponding to the 8 realms from quasi-heavenly venerables to the 7th step. Although the 7th step could also enter the first space, their combat strength would be suppressed, and they wouldn't be able to use their full strength. This was a dimensional war, and the rules of the war were determined by the origin world. Even the 7th step had to follow the rules of the game. But when they arrived, they found that the space here was severely damaged. End of this chapter. Chapter 2911. How serious? The 1st to 6th layers were squeezed together, while the 7th and 8th layers still existed independently. The 1st to 6th layers were squeezed together, while the 7th and 8th layers still existed independently. This kind of spatial compression couldn't be restored, and even celestial venerables couldn't do anything about it because it involved the origin world itself. Even if one was as strong as a 7th-step expert, could he fight against such a huge origin world? In other words, 5th-step celestial venerables and below would have to stay in one space to fight. Zhou Heng and the other 6th-step experts immediately discussed and divided the team into 2. One team was naturally at 6th step, while the other team was at 5th step. They would go to the first layer to set up defense. Under the leadership of the 6th-step experts, the other team would be commanded by these 3 people. Lin Yu Lian, Xen Chihu, and Wu Haoyang had all advanced to 5th step. After so many years, they had finally advanced a step further. No one was unconvinced, and even the veteran 5th-step experts didn't object. These 3 5th-step experts were too powerful, and their battle prowess was enough to soar to 6th step. With them overseeing things, it was safer than having a few 6th-step experts. Because in this first layer, their realms were suppressed to 5th step. So who was more powerful at 5th step? Of course, it was the 3 greatest geniuses of all time. However, this wasn't good news for Ling Han, because he saw Xen Chihu casting a cold and awe-inspiring gaze at him, as if he was already a dead man. Damn, this guy would definitely use his position to avenge his personal grudge and make a move on him. He was the commander-in-chief, so he was completely capable of arranging for Ling Han to be under his command. When there was a frenzy of attacks, he would arrange for Ling Han to be placed in the most dangerous place. Once Ling Han died, he would be able to extract his soul and obtain all of Ling Han's secrets. He could even do it himself and throw the crime to frenzy. But what if Ling Han objected and ran away? Didn't he know that the punishment for deserters in the extraterritorial battlefield was incomparably cruel? As long as Ling Han dared to run away, Xen Chihu would be able to attack him openly and confidently. After thinking about it, this seemed to be a dead end. Ling Han, come. Lin Yu Lian suddenly said, "From now on, you are my deputy general." Ling Han was astonished. Lin Yu Lian was publicly protecting him. Xen Chihu immediately revealed a look of dissatisfaction, but he did not say anything. He only sneered. Obviously, it was impossible for him to let the matter rest. "Many thanks, Miss Lin." Ling Han sent a voice transmission to Lin Yulian. Lin Yulian only nodded. Her beautiful eyes looked forward with a hint of worry. Now that frenzy had made a comeback, it could be said that it was accumulating power and waiting. What awaited them was definitely an army that could topple mountains and overturn seas. However, after so many years of internal strife, not only had they used up too many experts, but their hearts were also not united. Would they be completely routed in one wave of attacks? She sighed in her heart. But no matter what, they had to hold their ground. Otherwise, chaos would push the front lines forward. After losing a large amount of territory, the strength of the Firefrost Plain would be greatly weakened, and they would be in an extremely disadvantageous position. The team advanced step by step, and layers of city defenses began to be built. This was their path of retreat. At most, they only had 1 billion years, so they had to make the best use of their time. Time continued to pass, and the whole team advanced very mechanically. The construction of city walls was naturally completed by celestial kings, and sometimes quasi-celestial venerables would also go to help. At this time, who dared to talk about their status? The atmosphere was so oppressive, and from time to time, there would be internal strife and great battles, but the reason for this was actually insignificant. This was because the pressure was too great and everyone's nerves were stretched taut. They also became easily impulsive and manic. Although Lin Yu Lian and the other two were the most talented geniuses throughout the ages, and their martial prowess could crush everyone here, they were helpless when faced with the changes in people's hearts. 100 million years, 200 million years passed, and they also built layer after layer of city defenses. After more than 900 million years, they did not advance anymore. Instead, they began to strengthen the last layer of city defense. This was their first line of defense against Frenzy's army. Everyone was making their final preparations to deal with a great battle that was about to come. However, people's hearts had really changed. Even if there were extremely strict rules that prohibited people from causing trouble and killing people, such things would happen from time to time. After all, there were only 3 people in Lin Yu Lian's group. In the end, various forces were established in the fortress, and just like before, they formed their own cliques. In this way, the matter of private killings was actually stopped. On this day, Ji Wuming, the large black dog, and the others came to find Ling Han. "Boss, let's also establish a force," he said. Ling Han smiled and said, "Haven't we been together for a long time? This is different. Everyone else has established their own forces, and there are obvious symbols on their clothes, so people can see with a single glance," he said. "Let's also go and get a set of uniforms so that people can see that we are from the Ling Alliance, and they won't dare to provoke us." Grandpa Dog was almost slaughtered and made into braised dog meat a few days ago. "Look, Grandpa Dog's tail is already bald." The large black dog turned around, and his tail could be seen poking out of his iron underwear. It was completely bald. Ling Han laughed loudly. "Haven't you always been very sneaky? How did you end up in such a miserable state? Damn brat, Grandpa Dog was almost killed by someone, and you are still laughing?" The large black dog stomped his foot. Ling Han nodded. "All right, let's also establish an alliance here, and officially establish a sect." They acted swiftly, and immediately began to make preparations, announcing the establishment of the Ling Alliance to everyone. Ling Han would be the alliance leader, and the heavenly venerables in the alliance were the Empress, Hunyo, the Rain Emperor, the original birth heavenly venerable, the large black dog, Ling Jianshui, Ling Fifan, Ji Wuming, Fire Lotus, Shichan Zi, and so on. There were not many heavenly venerables, but with Ling Han overseeing the alliance, this was a powerful sign. After another few 100,000 years, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing returned. Beyond Ling Han's expectations, Fu Tianxing not only advanced into the heavenly venerable tier, but even rushed up 3 steps in a single breath. In terms of cultivation level, he was already not inferior to his master, and Ling Shi was not far behind, also reaching 3 steps. This caused Ling Han to sigh with emotion. His daughter's strength was within his expectations, but he had not thought that this disciple that had been abducted by his daughter would also be so freakish, and it was very likely that he would surpass her. Of course, Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing had only caught up in terms of cultivation level, but in terms of battle prowess at the same cultivation level, there was no one that could compare with Ling Han. Like Ling Shi, Fu Tianxing had also contained a small world, formed from the collision of 2 planes. As long as he continued to grow stronger, his future would be limitless, and it was very possible that he would become the second Xan Chihu and Wu Haoyang. The return of these 2 people caused the strength of the Ling Alliance to increase greatly, and Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing also fell in love, and were preparing to consummate their marriage. When Ling Han found out about this, he almost could not help but kill Fu Tianxing. End of this chapter. Chapter 29:13. After the battle ended, the surviving Empyreans immediately began to recover. The next battle could happen at any time, so he had to maintain himself in peak condition. Otherwise, he might not be able to participate in the next battle alive. In just 3 years, the frenzied army made a comeback. The frenzy army set up camp and didn't attack immediately. In the past, the frenzy army didn't do this. They would attack as soon as they appeared because they didn't have intelligence. They only had the thought of killing and fighting. In the past, the army of chaos wouldn't have done this. They would attack as soon as they appeared because they didn't have a mind of their own. Their only thought was to kill and fight. The frenzy army only wanted numbers and combat power, but it didn't give them the intelligence they deserved. Frenzied creation only sought quantity and combat power, but would not give them the intelligence they should have. For the frenzy, free will was a kind of poison. To avoid trouble, it skipped the intelligence link. Anyway, its creation was simple. Even if it used 100 celestial venerables to exchange for 1 celestial venerables in the Frostflame plane, it would be worth it. To madness, free will was a kind of poison. In order to avoid trouble, it directly skipped over the step of intelligence. In any case, its creation was simple. Even if it used 100 celestial venerables to exchange for 1 celestial venerables from the fiery frost dimension, it would be worth it. Of course, it could also give intelligence and strength and control, but this would greatly increase the difficulty of its creation. The number of troops it could create at the same time would be reduced by 100 or even 1,000 times. Therefore, the frenzy army didn't have intelligence and was a product of compromise. But now, the frenzy army actually knew how to set up camp. This naturally didn't surprise everyone. They even felt a chill. If these armies really developed intelligence, then with their overwhelming numbers, what kind of terrifying combat power would they have? Just thinking about it made people shudder. If the frenzy army didn't attack, of course, the Frostflame army wouldn't take the initiative to attack. If they lost the defense of the city walls, they would lose their biggest advantage. This was too dangerous. This situation lasted for thousands of years. Finally, the frenzy army launched a new wave of attacks. Of course, it wasn't as strong as the last time. After all, it was a force that had been accumulated for hundreds of billions of years. How could they gather such a terrifying force in just a few thousand years? But this time, the frenzy army split into hundreds of scattered troops, each led by a monster, and attacked the city walls. Everyone could clearly see that although the monsters in the lead looked terrible, their eyes were filled with the light of wisdom. They finally understood that most of the frenzy army was simple-minded. They only knew how to fight and kill. However, frenzy had given these monster leaders considerable intelligence. They were celestial lords, after all. Once they were given intelligence, they should continue to improve. It was unknown whether they would betray frenzy one day, but at this stage, they would definitely not be easy to deal with. As long as they commanded reasonably, the frenzy army's strength would be greatly improved. The battle was very difficult. The city wall was lost and gained and lost, back and forth, a constant tug-of-war. Although the number of soldiers this time was much smaller, it took them more than half a year to finally annihilate all of the frenzy army. Naturally, the Flame Frost army paid a greater price. The only fortunate thing was that the Empyreans that had died on their side were basically at the first or second step. Their main combat strength hadn't suffered too much damage, but their follow-up attacks had suffered heavy losses. The short peace only lasted for 7 years before the frenzy army appeared again. This time, they set up camp outside the city. This made all the celestial venables tremble. They believed that they could not allow the frenzy army to accumulate troops like this. Otherwise, the losses would be too terrible. Lin Yulien and the other two summoned the other fifth-step powerhouses to discuss how to deal with this new frenzy army. Although Ling Han was only at Celestial Venable's 3rd Celestial Venables, his combat power was at Celestial Venable's 5th Celestial Venables. Naturally, he was also invited. Everyone offered their suggestions. No matter how much conflict they had before, they had to work together to deal with the frenzy army. Everyone understood this. Some advocated taking the initiative to attack. They could not give the frenzy army time to accumulate troops. Others advocated carrying out Operation Behead. As long as the intelligent leaders were killed, the frenzy army would return to its original state. Some advocated taking the initiative to attack. They didn't want to give the frenzy army any time to accumulate their forces. Some advocated taking action. As long as the intelligent leaders were killed, the frenzy army would return to its original state. There would be no difference. If they took the initiative to attack, they would not give the frenzy army time to accumulate troops. Others advocated carrying out Operation Behead. As long as the intelligent leaders were killed, the frenzy army would return to its original state. Operation Behead. This was possible, but how could they sneak into the enemy's camp and kill several leaders who were at least at the celestial venerable level? Should Xan Chihu and the other two, who had the combat power of a 6-step powerhouse, do it? The problem was that a 6-step powerhouse was not a god in front of a 5th-step powerhouse. There were at least tens of thousands of 5th-step powerhouses in the frenzy army. If they fell into the encirclement of these powerhouses, even a 6th-step powerhouse would be beaten to death. These 3 people were too important. Who would dare to let them take the risk? If these 3 people could not be moved, who would be sent to carry out this mission? I suggest that Ling Han go. Xan Chihu suddenly said, although Ling Han is only a 3rd-step powerhouse, his combat power can sweep away almost all 5th-step powerhouses. He is the most suitable person to complete this mission. Lin Yu Lian was about to object, but she saw that many 5th-step powerhouses had already nodded slowly. Some people really felt that Ling Han was suitable for this mission, while others hoped that he would die. For example, Na Lan Xiong, whose brother had been killed by Ling Han, and Qi Xian, whose ally, Fei Wu, had been killed by Ling Han. Let's vote. Those who think that Ling Han should go, please raise your hand. Xan Chihu did not give Lin Yu Lian a chance to speak. He directly went to the stage where everyone voted. More than half of the people raised their hands. This matter was directly sealed in the coffin. Ling Han, this mission will be handed over to you. You are in charge of choosing your teammates. Quality over quantity. A maximum of 10 people. Otherwise, you will not even need to get close to them. You will be discovered, Xan Chihu said seriously. This seemed to be supporting Ling Han, but this was similar to a suicide mission. Who would be willing to go with Ling Han? It should be known that in order to go to the enemy's camp, one had to have the combat power of a 5th-step powerhouse. Now that all the 5th-step powerhouses were here, it was clear how difficult this mission was. Who would be stupid enough to go with Ling Han? What if Ling Han refused? Perhaps Xan Chihu would fly into a rage and kill Ling Han for disobeying orders. On the battlefield, the most taboo thing was disobeying orders. Ling Han looked at Xan Chihu in surprise. He had never seen this guy before. How could he be so vicious? Don't waste time. Otherwise, the number of frenzy soldiers will increase, and it will be even more impossible to succeed. Xan Chihu revealed a smile and looked at Ling Han. Within 3 days, choose the members of the team. You must come out. End of chapter. Chapter 29:14. There was no room for refusal and no room for argument. Xan Chihu brought out his authority as the commander-in-chief and directly gave Ling Han a mission that could be said to be extremely dangerous. He looked at Ling Han with a faint smile, a hint of arrogance at the corner of his mouth. This was telling Ling Han that he had done this on purpose, but did he have the ability to bite him? You couldn't. You could only accept it. At this moment, Ling Han truly wanted to wash his hands of this matter. Fuck, he had come to deal with the frenzy army, not to be bullied and definitely not to be tricked. However, he quickly suppressed this thought. Xan Chihu could use his position to take revenge, but he couldn't let his emotions affect his decisions. It could be said that if there was anyone in this world who could truly deal with the problem of frenzy, it would be him. Although Ling Han couldn't absorb the life essence of the frenzy soldiers who had died in battle, under intense battles, his cultivation would increase faster than cultivating in seclusion. This was because he was a battle maniac. Using battle to nurture battle was the fastest way for him to improve himself. Here, his cultivation speed was the fastest, and no one knew how much time they had left. Frenzy's attacks came one after another. Even a 7-step cultivator could only barely hold back its main body. It couldn't pull away at all. It was needless to say who was better and who was worse. He had to quickly increase his cultivation and reach the 6th or 7th step. That way, even if the planar power in his body wasn't complete, he would at least have unlimited possibilities as a 7-step cultivator. Thus, Ling Han swallowed his anger and looked straight at Xan Chihu. This bastard. What kind of prodigy was he? He was using his position to take revenge. When he reached the 4th or 5th step, he would definitely beat this bastard up. So what if there was a 7-step cultivator behind him? He would definitely kill him. Go! Xen Chihu waved his hand, looking like he was chasing him away. Ling Han didn't say anything. He just turned and left. Soon, Lin Yulian walked over. Ling Han, do you blame me? She asked apologetically. Ling Han shook his head. This has nothing to do with you. Lin Yulian, however, said, during this expedition, elder brother repeatedly told me to follow Xen Chihu's orders. If he makes a decision, I cannot disobey. Oh, there is such a thing? Ling Han was surprised. Lin Xiaoyang shouldn't be unaware of the conflict between him and Xen Chihu, right? Why would he deliberately add a band-tightening curse on Lin Yulian? Did Lin Xiaoyang not expect Xen Chihu to be so short-sighted and use his position to avenge a personal grudge, or did he have other intentions? Ling Han thought about it and immediately shook his head. There was absolutely no problem with Lin Xiaoyang. A mission is a mission, but whether or not I can complete it is another matter. Lin Yulian said, no one said that a mission must be successful, especially such a big mission. Do you understand? Ling Han nodded. What Lin Yulian meant was that this mission only needed to go through the formalities. Going deep into the enemy's camp was simply an act of suicide. However, Ling Han was unafraid, because he could travel through the origin world. With his current strength, even this foreign battlefield couldn't stop him from traveling as he wished. Thus, he had no problem protecting himself. This was also the reason why he did not become hostile on the spot. He wanted to see what kind of expression Xen Chihu would have when he returned with the corpse of the Frenzy Army's leader. Lin Yulian quickly left. She was one of the commanders and had many things to deal with. Ling Han, someone called from outside his stone house. Ling Han walked out to take a look, but saw that the other party was an unfamiliar 5th-step elite. Nailan Xiong, the expert, introduced himself with a fierce look in his eyes. Ling Han suddenly understood. This was Nailan Xiong's elder brother. Had he come to take revenge for his brother's death? You want to sign up for this mission? He smiled. Brother Nailan really cares about the world. I admire you. Come, let us create history together so that future generations will forever remember Brother Nailan. Nailan Xiong was dumbfounded. He had come to see Ling Han make a fool of himself. He had taken the opportunity to ridicule him. It didn't matter if Ling Han acted on impulse or if he went to the enemy's camp or if he disobeyed orders, it would be a terrible thing for Ling Han. But Ling Han wanted him to join the mission? Create history together, my ass. That was suicide. Besides, Ling Han had said that he would only remember him. That meant that he was going to die. Why didn't you die? Nailan Xiong had heard that Ling Han was a vicious person, but he had never thought that he could be that vicious. Nailan Xiong had only said a few simple words to make him feel depressed. Come, give me your handprint. Then you'll be part of my suicide squad. No, I'll be part of the mission. Ling Han took out a piece of paper and reached out to grab Nailan Xiong so that he could give him his handprint. Nailan Xiong hadn't been able to breathe yet, so he quickly moved aside and said, Ling Han, don't cause trouble. Why are you being so humble? It's a great achievement to be able to contribute to the origin world. People will definitely remember your sacrifice. Ling Han smiled and grabbed Nailan Xiong's hand. He was so strong that Nailan Xiong couldn't shake him off. Nailan Xiong's face turned green. If he gave him his handprint, he wouldn't be able to explain himself. Even if he wanted to join the mission, he didn't need to give him his handprint. At the level of a celestial, no oath could bind them. But it was still humiliating. In the future, when people talked about it, they would say that Nailan Xiong had given him his handprint, but he had run away. Nobody would care about the truth. They would just understand it the way they wanted to. Nailan Xiong tried his best to resist, but Ling Han was too strong. Even though he was at the late stage of the 5th step, he wasn't much stronger than Ling Han. The two of them were fighting like gangsters on the streets. Nailan Xiong's face turned green. He shouted and a rune lit up. His strength increased exponentially. Ling Han laughed and activated a rune. Not only did his strength increase, but he was also able to suppress Nailan Xiong. He grabbed Nailan Xiong's hand and gave him a handprint. Ling Han, have you had enough? Shouted Nailan Xiong furiously. It's not stained. Let's do it again, said Ling Han. He cut Nalan Xiong's hand with his finger. Blood spurted out. Don't waste so much blood. Let's make a handprint. Slap. He forced Nalan Xiong's hand onto the paper. Damn it. Nalan Xiong shouted. Power surged out of his body. The piece of paper immediately shattered into pieces. He had finally managed to break free from Ling Han's control. He glared at Ling Han with eyes full of anger. It was as if he wanted to skin Ling Han alive. Nalan Xiong had come to see Ling Han make a fool of himself. He had wanted to take the opportunity to ridicule him. How had things turned out like this? He had been humiliated by Ling Han. Ling Han shook his head and sighed. Nalan Xiong, I despise you for not participating in such a great cause. Chapter and Cell Phone Reading. Chapter 29:15. If Nalan Xiong was strong enough, he would definitely kill Ling Han. If Nalan Xiong was strong enough, he would definitely kill Ling Han. He couldn't take it anymore. Why didn't you come to sign up? What are you doing here? Ling Han sat down and crossed his legs. Nalan Xiong wanted to say that he was here to laugh at Ling Han, but after what he had just experienced, he couldn't say that. He was the real joke. Ling Han, I'd like to see how you're going to come back alive, he said darkly. You don't have to worry about that. Ling Han waved his hand. I'm not related to you in any way. It's not good for you to stick to me like this. Those who know will know that you're trying to flatter me, but those who don't know will think that there's something wrong with your sexual orientation. Nalan Xiong was dumbfounded again. Ling Han was too evil. He wanted to vomit blood. You can only talk now. I'd like to see who would join your suicide squad. He calmed down. After all, he was a celestial venerable. Ling Han laughed and said, You're worrying for nothing again. Nalan Xiong took a few steps back and sat down in a corner of the city wall. There were only 3 days, so he wanted to see Ling Han's disappointed expression. No one would be stupid enough to travel with Ling Han. Actually, it wasn't difficult for Ling Han to find people to travel with him. The Empress, Hu Niu, the Rain Emperor, and the others would definitely agree without hesitation. But how could Ling Han let them take the risk? Moreover, those who didn't have the battle prowess of level 5 wouldn't be of much help. It was better for Ling Han to go alone. He could escape as soon as he saw that the situation was not right. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days passed by very quickly, yet not a single person came to find Ling Han of their own volition, wanting to join this mission. This was within Ling Han's expectations, so he didn't care at all. The cold smile on Nalan Xiong's face was getting bigger and bigger. He wanted to see Ling Han's helpless face the next day. It would make him feel even better. But at this moment, a man walked over from afar. When he arrived in front of Ling Han's stone house, he stopped and said to Nalan Xiong, Is this Ling Han's residence, Brother Ling? Damn, you think I'm a doorman? Nalan Xiong's facial expression became very unsightly. He wanted to punch someone, but he didn't. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but the other party was also at the 5th step. Fu Yuan had only taken several tens of billions of years to take the 5th step, but his momentum was astonishing and it was very likely that his strength was no less than his own. Besides, the other party didn't say anything insulting. If he acted rashly, he would definitely be in the wrong in the end, and he might have to apologize to the other party under pressure. He snorted and pretended not to hear anything. Looking for me? Ling Han pushed open the door and walked out. Fu Yuan smiled and said, Brother Ling, I'm Fu Yuan. I'm here to ask if there's a spot left for you. Nalan Xiong was surprised. From the way this person was talking, it seemed like he wanted to join them. Did a donkey kick him in the head? Even if you're tired of living, you don't need to commit suicide like that. You'll die without a corpse. Ling Han was also surprised and said, There's a spot. Does Brother Fu want to join us? It depends on whether you want to or not, said Fu Yuan with a smile. Ling Han smiled and said, Brother Fu, don't you know that this mission is extremely dangerous? Fu Yuan laughed and said, If it wasn't so dangerous, then it would be very boring. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He was slightly surprised by this reply, but he also felt a sense of appreciation for the fact that this was a kindred spirit. If Brother Fu isn't afraid of death, then there's a spot for you here, said Nalan Xiong. All right. Fu Yuan nodded and sat down next to him. Nailan Xiong was very surprised. He had thought that there would be no one else who would travel with Ling Han, but now Fu Yuan's appearance had shocked him greatly. Fu Yuan was a fifth-step celestial master, and he wasn't just some random kid. "Brother Nalan, are you coming with us?" asked Fu Yuan. Nalan Xiong waved his hand. He didn't want to be held hostage by morality. Then why is Brother Nalan here? Fu Yuan didn't understand. Ling Han laughed and said, "I want to know too." Nalan Xiong's face turned red. He was making a sacrifice, and they didn't want to support him, but they were actually here to laugh at him. What kind of a joke was that? Nalan Xiong didn't want to lose face, so he angrily ran away. Ling Han and Fu Yuan exchanged a look, and then both burst out laughing. "Brother Fu, do you know that this mission is extremely dangerous?" asked Ling Han. Fu Yuan nodded. "I've reached a cultivation bottleneck. I need to experience life and death to help me break through." "All right, then we'll help each other," said Ling Han. With the help of a fifth-step celestial master, he was a bit more confident. The two of them waited for a while, and the third day finally came to an end. However, there was no second person who ran over to register. This was also within Ling Han's expectations. In truth, the fact that Fu Yuan had participated was already very surprising to him. "Let's go." Ling Han left the immortal visitor residence behind. Even if he could travel through space at will, he had already fallen out with Frenzy. What if he was caught? Even if Frenzy couldn't use his main body's power, he could still use a clone of the sixth-step celestial master. He had to take another step before he could truly roam the world. The two of them left the city walls and retracted their auras, heading towards the enemy camp. Although the Frenzy army camp was thousands of miles away, to a celestial master, such a distance was nothing. After a short while, the two of them arrived outside the camp. They shook their bodies and changed their forms, becoming similar to the Frenzy army. Anyway, they had many arms and legs and were extremely ugly. Then their auras became cold and evil. They couldn't imitate the aura of a fifth-step celestial master, but it wasn't a problem for them to imitate a fourth-step or three-step celestial master. Of course, this could only fool them. If they tried to distinguish their auras, they wouldn't be able to hide them at all. The two of them swaggered into the Frenzy camp. Most of the monsters here were mindless killing machines, and they were all resting under orders. The entire camp was deathly silent, like a graveyard. This was very strange. It was a camp with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, but it was so quiet. "Where can we find them?" Fu Yuan asked with his divine sense. Although they were disguised as the Frenzy army, everyone else was resting, and they were the only ones moving around. This was too obvious. Although this was a camp, the army of mayhem didn't need tents. The entire army sat on the ground like statues, their eyes closed. Although they looked different, they all felt the same. How could they find their leader? If they're given intelligence, they'll definitely be different, Ling Han said to himself. He pulled Fu Yuan to sit down, then released his divine sense to explore. End of chapter. Chapter 29:17. Ling Han instantly made a decision. He burst forth with all his strength and charged at Fu Yuan. The leaders kept giving orders, not using all their strength to stop Ling Han's approach. The two of them were already surrounded. So what if they met? "Brother Ling, don't worry about me. Break out yourself," Fu Yuan said. Although he was 5 steps strong, he was panting, and his body was covered in blood. Ling Han laughed loudly. "We came together, so of course we have to go back together." "Dream on," a monkey-like leader of the monsters said coldly. "Shio shio shio." Instantly, millions upon millions of arrows formed from power shot toward Ling Han and Fu Yuan. Under this volley of attacks, Ling Han and Fu Yuan would definitely suffer. Ling Han grabbed Fu Yuan. "Brother Fu, be careful." He struck out again, tearing space apart, and stepped in. Swish, the two of them instantly disappeared. "They escaped into the void," the monkey muttered. It snorted. "Other than Master, everyone is a headless fly in the void. Can you escape?" These monsters all tore space apart, but the void was chaotic and energy storms were everywhere. In an instant, many of the monsters were torn to pieces, but there was no sign of Ling Han and Fu Yuan. Strange, how did they escape? Without the plane coordinates, even Frenzy could not enter any plane at will. But what about Ling Han? Ling Han took another step, and had already returned to the fiery frost plane from the void. However, the corresponding fiery frost plane that he had taken a step out of the void was too far off. Thus, the place he was currently at was not the foreign battlefield at all. This is… Fu Yuan had just escaped death, and his face was still filled with shock. He looked around in shock. Frost plane. He looked at Ling Han. Brother Ling, you have the ability to travel between planes. If he had torn the void, he would not have been able to go far. He could only go back the way he came. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would be lost in the eternal void, and who knew how long it would take for him to return. But Ling Han had done it easily. Naturally, he was shocked. Ling Han smiled. I've said it before. Since we came together, of course, we have to go back together. Previously, when he said those words, Fu Yuan must have thought that it was just words of comfort, but now, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. I really didn't expect that Brother Ling actually has the ability to freely traverse between planes. Fu Yuan sighed with emotion. No wonder Brother Ling is so calm and composed. Even though he has accepted such a dangerous mission, he is still not flustered. Ling Han laughed out loud. I'm not as good as Brother Fu in this aspect. Brother Fu is the real brave one. I'm ashamed. I still had to rely on Brother Ling's help to escape with my life. Fu Yuan shook his head. Although we didn't manage to kill them all, we did kill 2 leaders. We can report back now, said Ling Han with a smile. Let's go back. The 2 of them returned to the foreign battleground a few days later. Everyone was shocked to see Ling Han and Fu Yuan. It wasn't like no one had seen Ling Han and Fu Yuan leave the city. Not long after, there was a huge commotion among the frenzied army, but it quickly calmed down. In everyone's opinion, Ling Han and Fu Yuan should have been killed. This was a very reasonable guess. How could they not die when surrounded? But now, Ling Han and Fu Yuan actually returned alive. How could they not feel like they had seen a ghost? Soon, the entire camp was in an uproar. Lin Yu Lian, Xan Chihu, and Wu Haoyang immediately called for a meeting and invited Ling Han and Fu Yuan. Ling Han, did you complete the mission? Xan Chihu immediately asked. This will depend on how Brother Xian defines the word completed, Ling Han said with a smile. Xian Chihu snorted. Don't be so glib. All right. Ling Han nodded. Brother Fu and I went deep into the enemy's camp and killed 2 monsters. Do you have evidence? Xan Chihu continued. How would I know if you killed a few monsters outside and quietly slipped away? Hearing this, many 5th step heavenly venerables frowned. Aren't you looking for trouble? The people of the Ling Alliance were even more indignant. This was too much. I knew you would ask this. Ling Han casually waved his hand, and 2 mutilated corpses appeared on the ground. Here, this is the evidence you wanted. It's just 2 corpses. What can they prove? Xan Chihu said lightly. Ling Han smiled. These 2 corpses still have some aura. Everyone here has fought against the frenzied creation for a long time. You should be able to tell the difference. Everyone focused their senses and quickly nodded. The aura of these 2 monsters was indeed different. They were not like other monsters that only had violent and cruel auras. In the face of such ironclad evidence, Xan Chihu had nothing to say. He could use his power to suppress others, but he could not distort the truth. After all, he still had Lin Yu Lian and Wu Haoyang by his side. You only killed 2? Xan Chihu began to nitpick again. There are at least 5 leaders in the frenzied army. You only killed 2. How can you say you completed the mission? Ling Han smiled. I never said that I could definitely complete this mission. Also, do you think that's realistic? Everyone shook their heads. This was not realistic either. Previously, everyone thought that Ling Han would not return. They did not expect that not only would Ling Han return, but he had also killed 2 monsters. This was a great contribution. But not only did Xan Chihu not record Ling Han's contribution, he even made things difficult for Ling Han. This was too outrageous. Brother Xan, you've gone too far, Lin Yulian said. Her tone was cold. She was clearly angry. Wu Haoyang also nodded. Although he had lost to Ling Han, he had only wanted to have a fair fight with Ling Han to prove himself. He had never thought of using any dishonest methods. Xan Chihu smiled. So what if everyone in the world objected? He did not need to take it to heart. Since the mission has not been completed, let's continue, he said to Ling Han. What? This meant that Ling Han had to continue heading to the enemy camp and carry out the mission. Wasn't this crazy? They had succeeded the first time because the frenzied army had not expected Ling Han to be so daring. But there was no second chance. How could they succeed again? If they went again, they would be sending themselves to their deaths. Ling Han was also startled. He knew that Xan Chihu had been targeting him all along, but to oppress him so openly was still greatly out of his expectations. This was too shameless, wasn't it? After all, you are the greatest prodigy of all time. Can't you have some face? Everyone, don't you think that Ling Han is the best candidate to complete this mission? Xan Chihu suddenly said, raising his voice. Ask yourselves, if he falls into a tight encirclement, would he still have a chance to escape? But Ling Han could. He came back and scathed. For the big picture, Ling Han, don't you think you should put aside your selfishness? For the flames now plain, for the big picture, can you retreat? The last sentence was directed at Ling Han. End of this chapter. For a perfect anti-theft chapter, please search for the keyword, Yu novel. You can read all kinds of novels. Chapter 29:18. Ling Han's expression was solemn. This was a top prodigy, and it was very possible that he was no weaker than Lin Yulian and the others. However, he was not well known. Huh? Is it because he's called White Rice that he's so low-key? This introduction was indeed a bit degrading. A certain elite that could suppress the heavens was actually called White Rice. White Rice charged over, his palms flying. Boom 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 boom. The winds and clouds surged, and it was incredibly terrifying. Thankfully, this was the intersection of the two realms, and part of it was even a void. Thus, there was no need to fear such destruction. Otherwise, if two people with battle prowess of level 5 battled, even a medium realm would be destroyed. The two of them exchanged a few blows. This was to test the level of each other's power. Brother Ling is indeed extraordinary, possessing battle prowess of level 5 at level 3. I am truly impressed, White Rice said sincerely. Although he wasn't famous, he was actually very proud. He didn't even care about Lin Yulian and Xan Chihu, who were the greatest prodigies of all eternity. He believed that he definitely wouldn't lose, but when facing Ling Han, he was extremely impressed. Ling Han was able to match him even though his cultivation level was lower. He was definitely the first person in history. You're not bad too. Ling Han nodded. There were really only a few people that could compare to this White Rice. White Rice smiled faintly. However, basic power is only one part of battle prowess. It cannot decide victory or defeat. What ultimate move do you have? Show it to me. Ling Han was very excited. He was very excited to see what ultimate move White Rice would use. White Rice's right hand shook, and a symbol lit up. He charged over again. His power soared, and it was at least 30 times stronger. He used a 6th-rate symbol right off the bat. How rich? Ling Han was even more curious. Was this a celestial venerable tier symbol that this guy had comprehended on his own, or was it given to him by his seniors? He also used a 6th-rate symbol and clashed with White Rice. Both of them had battle prowess around the late stage of level 5, and the boost from the celestial venerable tier symbols was also about the same. Naturally, it was impossible to determine who was stronger. The intensity of their battle was astonishing. People like the Empress were not even qualified to participate. After fighting for a while longer, White Rice finally got serious. He used a sword technique, and as a cold light flashed, the sword chi cut through everything and destroyed everything. It was shockingly terrifying. Ling Han also unsheathed his divine demon sword, and neither of them seemed to be at a disadvantage. He was not in a hurry. After all, he was one level lower. A tie would definitely be more urgent. As expected, White Rice started to increase his power. He activated the other heavenly venerable symbols and increased his battle prowess. 40 times, 50 times, 60 times. The number of Empyrean symbols he grasped was astonishing, and the level was also getting higher and higher. Ling Han clicked his tongue in wonder. Just what kind of background did this fellow have? His foundation was truly astonishing. However, Ling Han wasn't inferior either. He also activated high-level heavenly venerable symbols to keep up with White Rice's battle prowess. In the end, White Rice used a rune. Instantly, a heaven-suppressing aura surged. It was as if he had suddenly become an invincible god. First-rate talisman. Ling Han was shocked. Fuck, what was going on now? Did everyone already have a first-class symbol? Boom! White Rice's sword swept over, and the sword ray cut through heaven and earth. It was incredibly terrifying. This was a slash that was enhanced by the power of a first-class symbol. Its might was too terrifying. Ling Han wasn't afraid. It wasn't like he didn't have any first-class symbols. In fact, he even had 2 complete sets of combination symbols. If he used them, then it would be truly frightening. Hong hong hong. The battle between the 2 great elites was earth-shattering. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many people. When they discovered that the person that Ling Han was fighting with was actually a very unfamiliar young man, they were all shocked. Who is this guy? He has the battle prowess of a level 4. He isn't inferior to those 3. But how did this kind of person appear out of nowhere? He also has a first-class symbol. Heavens, could he be the descendant of some level 7? Everyone was curious, but they kept asking each other. Actually, no one knew White Rice's true identity. Ling Han muttered in his heart. Don't say that this guy is someone from Madness, just like Meng Dong and the others. There were almost 100 people mixed in the fiery frost plane, and they had all advanced into the heavenly venerable tier. Every one of them should have grasped a heavenly venerable symbol. However, it would be too presumptuous to think that the other party was a remnant of Madness based on this point alone. Furthermore, although Meng Dong and the others also had the ability to fight above their levels, they definitely weren't as exaggerated as White Rice. This guy's monstrous talent really didn't lose to Lin Yu Lian or Xan Chihu. While thinking this, Ling Han didn't stop attacking. Instead, he attacked even more quickly. Good. White Rice was excited from the battle. Take another move from me. He was really excited from the battle. He didn't call Ling Han Brother Ling, nor did he refer to himself as I. As he howled, his right eye suddenly shone, projecting an illusory image that quickly turned into a world. This world was very small, but although it was small, it had all the essentials. There were mountains, rivers, seas, and lakes. However, it was barren and didn't give birth to any life. However, Ling Han frowned slightly. He felt a terrifying pressure. This world gave him an extremely realistic feeling. Go! White Rice shouted, and this world descended towards Ling Han. Boom! It was as if a world was really suppressing him. Ling Han came to a realization. This is the plane that you've stored in your body. That's right. White Rice didn't deny it and directly nodded to admit it. However, I haven't cultivated it to the great success realm. Thus, I can only reflect about 10% of my power. This was too terrifying. Using a world to suppress an opponent was simply crushing. So the small world in one's body could be used like this. Even if it was only 10% of its power, it was still extremely shocking. It made Ling Han feel that he definitely didn't want to fight against it. Otherwise, he would be crushed into pieces. However, this was a spar. If he didn't dare to take this move, didn't that mean that he lost? He abandoned his sword. Boom! The 9 path symbols all activated, and he punched out again. His combat strength was almost pushed to the limit. If he was stronger, he would have to use the 8 paths combination symbol. However, this was Ling Han's current trump card. Boom! As this world descended, Ling Han punched out repeatedly. Peng, peng, peng. With every punch, a crack would appear in this world. When it was about to land on Ling Han's head, it was already covered in cracks. Then, Ling Han threw out a punch to make up for it. Peng! This world finally collapsed, and endless energy surged. Hong! The entire camp shook. What a terrifying attack power. Ling Han was also a little out of breath. He had only thrown out a few thousand punches, but it was already strenuous for him. It could be seen how much pressure he was under. The surrounding people were in an uproar. Who would have thought that a fourth-step cultivator would be so ferocious? Who the hell was this guy? Chapter 29:19. Ling Han's expression was solemn. This was a top prodigy, and it was very possible that he was not weaker than Lin Yu Lian and the others. However, he was not well known. Is it because he is called White Rice that he is so low-key? This introduction was indeed a bit degrading. A certain elite that suppressed the heavens was actually called White Rice. White Rice charged over, his palms flying. The wind and clouds surged, and it was extremely terrifying. Thankfully, this was where the two realms intersected, and part of it was even a void. Thus, there was no need to fear such destruction. Otherwise, if two people with battle prowess of level 5 battled, even this realm would be destroyed. The two of them exchanged a few blows. This was to test the level of each other's power. Brother Ling is indeed extraordinary. You have battle prowess of level 5 at level 3. I really admire you, White Rice said sincerely. Though he was not famous, he was actually very proud. He did not even take Lin Yu Lian and Xan Chihu, who were the greatest prodigies of all time, seriously. He thought that he would definitely not lose. However, when facing Ling Han, he was filled with admiration. Ling Han, who was one cultivation level lower than him, was definitely the first person in history to be able to match him. You are not bad too. Ling Han nodded. There were really only a few people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with this White Rice. White Rice smiled calmly. However, basic power is only one part of battle prowess. It cannot decide victory or defeat. What ultimate move do you have? Show it to me. Ling Han was very excited. He was really looking forward to what ultimate move White Rice would use. White Rice's right hand shook, and a symbol lit up. He charged over again. His power increased explosively, increasing by at least 30 times. A sixth-rate symbol in one hand. He was rich and overbearing. Ling Han was even better. This was a celestial venerable tier symbol that he had comprehended himself, and it was given to him by his seniors. He also used a sixth-rate symbol and clashed with White Rice. Both of them had battle prowess around the late stage of level 5, and the power of the celestial venerable tier symbols was about the same. Naturally, it was impossible to determine who was stronger. The intensity of their battle was shocking. People like the Empress did not even have the right to interfere. After fighting for a while, White Rice finally got serious. He used a set of sword techniques. A cold light flashed, and the sword chi cut through everything. It was frightening. Ling Han also unsheathed his divine demon sword, and neither of them seemed to be at a disadvantage. He was not in a hurry. After all, he was one level lower. A tie would definitely be more urgent. As expected, White Rice started to increase his power. He activated the other heavenly venerable symbols and increased his battle prowess. 40 times, 50 times, 60 times. The number of Empyrean symbols he grasped was astonishing, and the level was also getting higher and higher. Ling Han clicked his tongue in wonder. Just what kind of background did this fellow have? His background was truly shocking. However, Ling Han wasn't inferior either. He also activated high-level heavenly venerable runes and was able to keep up with White Rice's battle prowess. In the end, White Rice used a rune. Instantly, a heaven-suppressing aura surged. It was as if he had suddenly become an invincible god. First-rate talisman Ling Han was shocked. Fuck, what was going on now? Did everyone already have a first-class symbol? Boom! White Rice's sword swept over, and the sword rays sliced through heaven and earth. It was extremely terrifying. This was a slash that was enhanced by the power of a first-class symbol. Its might was too terrifying. Ling Han wasn't afraid. It wasn't like he didn't have any first-class symbols. In fact, he even had 2 complete sets of combination symbols. If he used them, then it would be truly frightening. Hong hong hong. The battle between the 2 great elites was earth-shattering. Naturally, it attracted the attention of many people. When they discovered that the person that Ling Han was fighting with was actually a very unfamiliar young man, they were all shocked. Who is this guy? He has battle prowess of a 5th step at the 4th step. He isn't inferior to those 3. But how did this kind of person appear out of nowhere? He also has a first-class symbol. Heavens, could he be the descendant of a certain 7th step? Everyone was curious, but they kept asking each other. Actually, no one knew White Rice's true identity. Ling Han mumbled internally. Don't say that this guy is someone from Madness, just like Meng Dong and the others. There were almost 100 people mixed in the fiery frost plane, and they had all advanced into the heavenly venerable tier. Every one of them should have grasped a heavenly venerable symbol. However, it would be too presumptuous to think that the other party was a remnant of Madness based on this. Furthermore, although Meng Dong and the others had a certain level of battle prowess, they definitely weren't as exaggerated as White Rice. This guy's monstrousness really didn't lose to people like Lin Yu Lian and Xan Chihu. With this thought in mind, Ling Han's attacks didn't stop at all. Instead, they became even faster. Good. White Rice was getting excited from the battle. Take another move from me. He was really excited from the battle. He didn't call Ling Han Brother Ling, nor did he refer to himself as I. Howling, his right eye suddenly shone, projecting an illusory image that quickly turned into a world. This world was very small, but although it was small, it had all the essentials. There were mountains, rivers, seas, and lakes. However, it was barren and didn't give birth to any life. However, Ling Han frowned slightly. He felt a terrifying pressure. This world gave him a feeling that it wasn't real. Go! White Rice shouted, and this world descended towards Ling Han. Hong, it was as if a world was really suppressing him. Ling Han came to a realization. This is the plane that you've stored in your body. That's right. White Rice didn't deny it. He nodded and admitted it. However, I haven't cultivated it to the great success realm. Thus, I can only reflect about 10% of my strength. This was too terrifying. Using a world to suppress one's opponent was simply crushing. So the small world in one's body could be used like this. Even if he only had 10% of his strength, it was still very shocking. It made Ling Han feel that he definitely didn't want to fight against it, or else he would be crushed into pieces. However, this was a spar. If he didn't dare to take this move, didn't that mean that he had lost? He abandoned his sword. Hong, all 9 symbols were activated. He punched out again, and his battle strength was almost pushed to the limit. If he was stronger, he would have to use the 8 combination symbols. However, this was Ling Han's current trump card. This world descended, and Ling Han punched out repeatedly. Peng, peng, peng. Every punch would cause a crack to appear in this world. When it was about to land on Ling Han's head, it was already covered in cracks. Ling Han punched out again. Peng! This world finally collapsed. Endless energy surged and Hong, the entire camp shook. What a terrifying attack strength. Ling Han was also slightly out of breath. He had only punched out a few thousand times, but it made him feel like it was strenuous. It could be seen how much pressure he was under. The surrounding people were also in an uproar. Who would have thought that a 4th step cultivator who suddenly appeared would be so ferocious? Who is this guy? BK reading on my phone is more refreshing. Chapter 2920. He could only say that Bai Fan was quite an amusing old man. He had given his son and grandson such weird names. Of course, Bai Fan's father was not simple. If he had not set a good example, there would not have been rising stars like Bai Qi and Bai Fan. Ling Han had always thought that he was bad at giving names, but there was always someone better than him. Today, he was convinced. Alright, the joke is over. Let's go, Ling Han said solemnly. The 4 of them moved towards the frenzy campsite. Before long, they were close to the campsite. After suffering a loss once, the frenzy troop was no longer resting. Instead, some of the monsters were on sentry duty. They were all multi-eyed monsters, and they were emitting divine sense waves to scan the surrounding environment. These guards were only at step 4, but they were more than enough for sentry duty. Ling Han and the other 3 shook their bodies, and their auras changed immediately. They had disguised themselves as the Frenzy Troop, and their auras were similar as well. It was impossible to see through their disguises, but it would be different if they were scanned carefully. They would definitely be exposed. It did not matter. These monsters were not intelligent, and they were very crude. Ling Han's group of 4 strode into the campsite. The divine sense of those guards only swept past them once, and did not linger on them at all. They began to look for targets to snipe, and soon, they locked onto 3. To ensure that we succeed in one shot, Brother Bai and I will be in charge of one each. The other one will be given to Brother Xian Feng and Brother Fu. Ling Han assigned the tasks. We'll kill these 3 today. All right. Bai Fan and the other 2 nodded. Bai Fan and Xian Feng did not ask Ling Han how they were going to break out of the encirclement, as they believed in Ling Han. The 4 of them took their positions and they attacked at the same time. Ling Han used his full strength the moment he attacked. As the first tier symbols circulated, his power was boosted to more than 80 times. The power was unstoppable, and the leader monster's head had already exploded before it could even react. He immediately kept the corpse and leaped towards the direction of the white rice. Bai Fan gave it his all, and his eyes glowed as he projected a world to suppress his target. But his target was surprisingly strong, and actually withstood this attack. Seeing that the surrounding monsters had opened their eyes and were emitting boundless hostility, White Rice shouted again. Its left eye also opened wide, and it flew out of the second world. There are actually 2 planes in his body. This power was too great. The target monster released a miserable cry and struggled on its deathbed, releasing a spirit attack. White Rice let out a muffled grunt, but the suppression of the 2 worlds did not waver. The target monster was instantly crushed into pieces. This was the projection of 2 planes, and its power was terrifying. It immediately created a mushroom-sized shockwave that spread out in all directions. Ping, ping, ping. Countless members of the deranged army were sent flying. They had no time to attack, giving White Rice some time to recover. By the time the attack from further away arrived, Bai Mi had already neutralized the mental attack. He immediately turned around and charged towards Fu Yuan and Fu Yuan. The 2 of them were not as powerful as Ling Han and White Rice. Even though they used all their skills, they were not able to kill their target. They only managed to injure it. Don't worry about it, Ling Han said as he charged over. Prepare to retreat. The 4 of them charged in one direction. As long as they converged, Ling Han would be able to tear open the space and escape with the 3 of them. Wishful thinking, one of the leaders said coldly. It commanded the army to attack fiercely, separating Ling Han and the others, not giving them a chance to converge. Ling Han let out a long cry. Even though White Rice and the others were monstrous, they could not withstand the combined attacks of over 10,000 fifth steps. He had to quickly bring them out. Peng, peng, peng. He activated the 9-stream combination talisman, and his momentum was unstoppable. Brother White, follow me. He first converged with White Rice, and then charged towards Xian Feng and Fu Yuan. He and White Rice worked together, and their battle prowess was unparalleled. Just as they were about to reach Fu Yuan and Xian Feng, the situation suddenly changed. Fu Yuan and Xian Feng were actually separated. Ling Han could only charge towards Xian Feng, who was closer to him. After rescuing him, he charged towards Fu Yuan. The 3 of them worked together, and their momentum was unstoppable. However, Fu Yuan was also being forced back by the monsters, and the distance between them was slowly closing. You guys leave first. Fu Yuan saw that Ling Han and the others were starting to get injured, and he immediately shouted. If Ling Han and the others left, he would definitely die. We came together and will leave together. Ling Han finally did not hold back anymore. He activated the 8-stream symbol, and instantly became unstoppable. With nearly 1,000 times his strength, how could a 5th step be his match? He brought Xian Feng and White Rice to attack Fu Yuan. He grabbed Fu Yuan, and without hesitation, he tore open the space and brought the 3 of them in. Xiao, the 4 of them disappeared. Even if the frenzy army tore open the space, they would not be able to find them. Ling Han and the 3 of them traveled through the space and quickly returned to the fiery frost plain. This is amazing. White Rice clapped and laughed. He knew that Ling Han was definitely proficient in some kind of escape technique. Otherwise, he would not have been able to escape the Frenzy Army's camp the first time he entered. However, he did not expect it to be like this. I really want to fight again, Xian Feng said, his face full of excitement. They had gone deep into the enemy's camp alone, and they were still able to leave in one piece. This was something worth remembering for the rest of their lives. Ling Han looked at White Rice. You really hit it well. You actually have 2 small worlds in your body. White Rice scratched his head. I didn't want to hide it. I wanted to use it when I was sparring with you, but you stopped me. Ling Han thought about it and realized that was indeed the case. How did you do it? He was very curious because Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing had also taken this path, but they could only contain 1 small world. There was no need to think about it. The power of 2 planes was definitely stronger. He quickly replied, if it's a secret, you don't have to force it. White Rice smiled. It's not a big secret. I just need to make a move in the 7 steps and open up some space in my Dantian to contain another small world. Can it contain a 3rd or 4th small world? Ling Han asked. White Rice shook his head. White Rice shook his head. Even if it's just accommodating 2 planes, not everyone can do it. It's very easy for one to be sucked dry while the plane is growing. Furthermore, one might not even be able to pass the stage of quasi-heavenly venerable and explode from the power of 2 planes. Ling Han glanced at him and said, You've said so much just to show off how awesome you are. No way. White Rice looked very serious. Of course not, Xian Feng said. Beat him up. Ling Han attacked first. With the 3 of them working together, no matter how monstrous White Rice was, he could not withstand it. Very quickly, he was beaten up. Chapter 29-21. The return of Ling Han's group of 4 to the camp naturally caused another uproar. Once might have been luck, but twice in a row, it was definitely not luck, but strength. This time, Ling Han and the others killed another 2 leader monsters. Their achievements were outstanding, and even Xan Chihu was too embarrassed to find fault with them. For the first time ever, he gave a few words of encouragement, but he still left a sentence for Ling Han to continue working hard. He couldn't be satisfied with just this, and had to continue to play his role. This meant that Ling Han's group had to continue to carry out the decapitation mission at the Frenzy camp. Ling Han started to rest. He had broken into the enemy's camp twice in a row. Although he had escaped unscathed, his mind was still very tense, and he needed to relax. Also, he had to go into seclusion to make some deductions. He was very interested in Bai Rui's ability to use the dimension. Of course, this move could only be used by people who had integrated a small world into their body before step 1. Without a dimension in their body, what could they use to suppress it? Ling Han's body contained boundless existential plane power, yet this was only the embryonic form. It would take a very, very long time for it to mature into a true plane. There was too much of it, and the amount of energy required for each step of growth was incredibly frightening. Originally, he was impartial and let these dimension power grow at a balanced rate. But now, he planned to focus on nurturing 1 or 2 of them so that they could evolve into a real world first. But there was a problem that had to be solved first. Right now, he was using cells as a vessel to nurture the endless dimension power. But to turn the dimension power into a real dimension, he needed to find a place to accommodate this dimension. Normally, a celestial venerable's body could accommodate a dimension, like Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing. But even step 7 could only make 1 more dimension in his body. Ling Han wanted to let 1 or 2 dimensions grow first. Was he supposed to let them enter his Dantian? That was simple, but how would he solve the problem when countless dimensions grew in the future? Therefore, letting the Dantian contain the dimensions was only a temporary measure, not a solution. Ling Han thought for a long time and decided not to move the dimension power to another place. Instead, he would keep it in the same place. If he wanted to become an origin world, then he needed a strong ability to accommodate it. Each cell contained a plane, and the cell wall was the plane's barrier, overlapping and endless. This was only a theory, but it was not something that could be taken for granted. Ling Han went to look for Vale. When it came to theoretical things, this guy was still more proficient. After Vale heard this question, he didn't hesitate to ask for a price of 100,000 pieces of immortal gold from Ling Han. Then, he started to help Ling Han with his divination. Because it had been too long, Ling Han couldn't leave the Outer Realm battlefield for too long, so he returned first and returned after a while. He and White Rice's group of 4 went out a few more times. Even though the other party was well prepared, they still couldn't stop them from killing people. However, each time was more dangerous than the last. The 4 of them returned with injuries. However, being able to come back alive was a huge miracle. The 4 of them became more and more famous, attracting more people to join their team. However, Ling Han no longer accepted people. It wasn't that he was arrogant, but if there were too many people, he wouldn't be able to free up his hands to bring all of them back alive. After going through such dangers, Ling Han's cultivation advanced very quickly. He calculated that in less than 100 million years, he could reach the late stage of Step 3 and steadily advance a level. After a few hundred years, the Frenzy Army finally launched a fierce attack. However, because of the decapitation operation, they lost many commanders, so the army couldn't display their strongest combat power. Even so, the Flame Frost Army also paid a huge price, and many people were injured or killed. Everyone was worried. If this continued, they might be forced to give up this stronghold very soon. Moreover, they wouldn't just retreat a little. They would have to retreat to the Flame Frost Plain and use the plane's suppression to resist the Frenzy Army. However, the consequence of this was that the Frenzy Army would take the opportunity to advance. In just a few 100 million years, they could turn this area into a passageway between the 2 worlds. If that happened, the Flame Frost Army would lose their advantage again. This was equivalent to drinking poison to quench thirst, a slow suicide. However, when that time came, they would have to take poison. Ling Han returned to the World No. 1 Martial Arts Institute to see what Wali would suggest. In the end, this guy was still calculating, so he could only leave. The battle didn't stop. Ling Han's group of 4 was still carrying out assassinations, but the Frenzy Army's defense was getting tighter and tighter. They couldn't successfully decapitate the leader no matter what. This was normal. If they had succeeded every time, how could this army have caused so much damage? After persisting for tens of thousands of years, their line of defense collapsed. They retreated 1,000 miles, and their lines of defense were lost one after another. In the end, they had to retreat from this area and use the Flame Frost Plains suppression to assist in the battle. This was a huge failure, but if they forced it, they would only be annihilated. The big shots had already made a decision to start building a second super high-level plane. Simply put, it was to speed up the progress of the planar war. They would clear out all the remaining high-level planes, and one of the planes would start devouring the other planes to create a second super high-level plane. Once the Flame Frost Plane was lost, they could still retreat and continue to fight against the Frenzy Army. Thus, the Flame Frost Plane was still struggling to resist, buying time for the new super high-level plane to appear. In the Flame Frost Plane, it was difficult for the Frenzy Army to advance. Under the suppression of the plane, the Frenzy Army's overall strength was weakened by a level. They could only exert the combat power of a 4-step or a little more than that. The threat was naturally much smaller, giving the Flame Frost Army a lot of time to catch their breath. Taking advantage of this time, the Celestial Venerables hurried to recover, break through, and improve their strength. In the blink of an eye, 300 million years passed. The environment of the world changed dramatically. The frenzy had already devoured the plane, turning the world that originally belonged to the Flame Frost Plane into a place where the 2 planes met. The suppression on the Frenzy Army also disappeared. A war broke out. After accumulating power for hundreds of millions of years, the Frenzy Army became unstoppable, causing the line of defense to collapse 1,000 miles again. After giving up a large amount of territory, the Flame Frost Army stood firm and continued to defend here. At this speed, they might be able to hold on for 100 billion years. By then, most of the Flame Frost Plane would be devoured, and it would fall from a super high-level plane. If it was just a high-level plane, it would be completely insufficient to fight against the Frenzy army. Moreover, the war between the seven-step celestial venerables would also cause great damage to the plane. It was tantamount to helping the Frenzy army. 100 billion years was enough for a new super high-level plane to appear among the current high-level planes. A portion of the celestial venerables were transferred to the high-level planes to help, speeding up the planar war. Ling Han finally received news from Wally. This fellow had completed his divination. Chapter 29-22. You owe me 100 million immortal gold. That was the first thing Vari said. Ling Han looked at him and saw that this guy was extremely weak, as if he would be blown away by a gust of wind. This calculation is too much. At least half of my calculation units collapsed due to overloading, Vale said. Ling Han nodded. Fine. Not just 100 million, I can even get you 1 trillion. As long as the plane power in his body could evolve into a real plane, then immortal gold would be a piece of cake. Look at madness. It was just a plane, but it could create endless celestial venerables. If it could become a primary world, immortal gold would be a piece of cake. Vale stretched out his finger and pointed at Ling Han's forehead. Then, it lit up and transmitted countless formulas and laws to Ling Han. Ling Han passively accepted it and compared it with his own comprehension, learning from each other's strengths to make up for his weaknesses. Vale, thank you so much, he said seriously. Don't think that you can get away with 100 million immortal gold just by saying that, Vale emphasized. Ling Han laughed loudly. Don't worry. I definitely won't. Alright, this place might not be safe in the future. Go to the Xuanma plane. It will become a super high-level plane in the future and replace it with this place. Are you trying to send me away and go back on your word? Vale asked suspiciously. Ling Han shook his head. The most important thing between people is trust. Alright, leave quickly. This place is getting more and more dangerous. Because there was already a plan to give up the Frost plane, the retreat was already underway. Also, the Xuanma plane would become a super high-level plane in the future. Right now, it was empty. All the forces had to settle in and divide the territory. Thus, they had to send people there as soon as possible. Ling Han started to cultivate in seclusion. Although the front line was important, it didn't matter if he was gone in this situation. With the suppression of the plane power, the Frost army had the absolute advantage. They just had to give up some territory from time to time. Back then, he used his cells to nurture the plane power because he thought that one day he could evolve this power into a real plane. Then, he would be a second primary world with endless combat power. But how could a single cell contain a plane? This would require Vari's help. To sum it up, it was very simple. Ling Han had constructed his own rules of space, allowing his cells to grow infinitely large. Just like how a mustard seed could contain a mountain, it was not impossible for a cell to contain a plane. However, while the conclusion was simple, the process was extremely complicated. Ling Han combined What's plan, but more of it was based on his own understanding. Calculations were Wally's specialty. He stood at a higher position and used Wally's calculations to verify his own ideas. He was the real decision-maker and promoter. This was a long process, but Ling Han had plenty of patience. For someone like Ling Shi, nurturing a plane in her dantian was a simple matter. Even if it was like white rice that needed to contain 2 planes at the same time, that would be taken care of by a 7-step powerhouse, and she only needed to nourish it. Ling Han was different. He nurtured a plane in a cell, so there was no place for him to use as a reference. Only Vari's calculations could help. Ling Han gave many possibilities, and Vari eliminated the completely impossible ones to reduce Ling Han's workload. He sat quietly, and the celestial venerable symbols in his body all lit up, communicating with heaven and earth, extracting 2 kinds of intrinsic particles to nourish his body. In the past, all the energy would be evenly distributed by the cells in his body, and the 2 kinds of intrinsic energy also needed to be strengthened. There were too many people crying piteously for food, which made Ling Han's cultivation progress shockingly slow. Now, Ling Han was fully nourishing the 2 cells in his body. This was fast. How many celestial venerable symbols did he have? More than 200. Not only were there first-rate symbols, but he also had all the symbols of the 8th and 9th streams. Under the resonance, how many times could his cultivation speed increase? One had to know that this wasn't a battle, where only one symbol or a group of symbols could take effect, but how many symbols could take effect? How many times did this increase his cultivation speed in total? 1,362 times. Such a terrifying cultivation speed was all added to the 2 cells, nourishing the 2 planes. What kind of concept was that? Only 20,000 years had passed, and in these 2 cells, the plane power had grown vigorously, each turning into a small world. How small was it? It was the same size as the small world that Ling Han had implanted into Ling Shi's body. Ling Han revealed a smile, not because of the growth of these 2 planes, but because of the formation of the planes. From plane power to a real plane, this step was too shocking. It had never been seen since ancient times, and perhaps it would never happen again in the future. However, this was just the beginning. Ling Han took the second step toward becoming the strongest in all of eternity. He began to strengthen these 2 planes. Time passed quickly, and soon, another 900,000 years had passed. These 2 planes had reached the level of a middle-level plane. There was no way to go further. Ling Han himself was only at the 3rd step, and his physique had a limit. Ling Han flipped his right hand, and a plane projection blasted out. The space trembled, and it was extremely terrifying. "It's not as good as white rice," he said softly. This was normal. White rice was at the 4th step, and this was the advantage of realms. There was no other way. If the quality is not good enough, then I will make up for it with quantity. Ling Han continued to cultivate in seclusion, and he continued to cultivate the 3rd and 4th planes. Another 900,000 years passed, and he cultivated these 2 planes to the peak of his current realm. He sensed and found that after nurturing 4 planes in his body, it created a lot of pressure on his physique. There was a limit to this. After reaching this limit, nurturing a new plane would be an act of courting death. However, was far from his limit. Ling Han went into seclusion again. Another 8 million years later, he transformed a total of 13 plane power into planes, and pushed them to the level of a middle-level plane. This was his current limit. Now, what level can my combat strength reach? Ling Han tore open the space and entered the void. If he carried out the trial here, it would really not cause any impact. With a thought, the 13 planes in his body projected out at the same time, turning into 13 plane shadows, emitting an extremely terrifying pressure. "Go!" he shouted softly, and pushed the 13 plane projections out. He blasted a hole in the energy storm in the void. Very awesome! Ling Han himself was shocked. With the addition of the 8th-rate combination talisman, can I even fight a 6th-step expert? He quickly shook his head. It should still be a little lacking. However, what if I throw caution to the wind and really throw all 13 planes out? Although these were only middle-level planes, if all 13 planes were thrown out, what kind of concept was that? Chapter 29-24. The terrifying thing about a plane was its size. A single plane was enough to pin down thousands of celestial venerables of the same level at the same time. Otherwise, how could Ling Han single-handedly kill the enemy leader in the midst of an army of 10,000? Not to mention him, even Lin Yu Lian and Xan Chihu couldn't do it. I only have 13 planes. What if I could have 130 or 1,300? Ling Han thought, and couldn't help but look forward to it. At that time, even if he fell into the Frenzy Army's encirclement, he wouldn't need to escape into the void. He just needed to release a plane projection, and these monsters could only be suppressed. If the projection was like this, what about the plane itself? How many times more powerful would it be? This couldn't be easily tried because if the projection was destroyed, then so be it. It would only take a few months or a few years before it could be used again. But the plane was different. This was the foundation, and if the foundation was gone, there would be a second time. So, this is my trump card, and I won't use it unless I have no other choice. Ling Han said in his heart, On the other hand, I have to increase my cultivation as soon as possible and increase the upper limit of the plane. He was about to tear open the void and return, but he suddenly felt an extremely uneasy feeling. Whoosh, in the void, he saw a whip shadow lashing over. It was Frenzy. This still wasn't Frenzy's main body, but it gave Ling Han an incomparably real feeling, oppressing him to the point that it was difficult to breathe. He suddenly had a feeling that this was Frenzy using the plane's power to oppress him. One had to know that Frenzy wasn't only the strongest in the world, but also a plane. If Ling Han could use plane projection to oppress people, why couldn't Frenzy? Not only could it, but it could even do it better than Ling Han, 100 times, 1,000 times better. The two weren't on the same level at all. Although it looked like a whip shadow lashing over, there was a plane projection within it, which was equivalent to a super high-level plane suppressing him. What kind of concept was this? Although Frenzy had attacked him in the past, it actually didn't carry any killing intent, and its purpose was just to awaken him. But this attack was completely different, and it was meant to kill him. Obviously, Frenzy had no intention of saving him. Since he had betrayed him, then he wouldn't hesitate to erase him. When the #1 expert in the world made a move, even if it was just a clone, who could stop it? At least 6 steps. The 13 planes in his body all shot out, forming a shield in front of him. The planar projection was able to affect even 5th-step experts, but now, not only had 13 planar projections appeared, but they were also planar projections. Their power had increased by at least 10 times, and the shield they formed should be impregnable. Peng, peng, peng. However, this wild attack instantly caused the 13 planes to explode, but it only managed to delay them for a brief moment. This bought a moment for Ling Han, but it also caused him to vomit blood. The plane collapsed, and he, as the main body, was naturally affected. However, he did not stop. He used this moment to tear open the space and return to the original world. Wah! He began to vomit large mouthfuls of blood. His complexion instantly became incomparably pale. He lay on the ground, not wanting to move at all. The plane that he had painstakingly nurtured had been destroyed. This was too painful. He looked inside his body. Fortunately, although the plane had been destroyed, there was still a trace of remnant power left. This could still allow him to slowly nurture the plane again. However, he would have to start from the beginning again. His thousands of years of hard work had been completely wasted. Damn it! Ling Han sat cross-legged and took out a great medicine. This was a restorative medicine. Crunch. He took a bite, trying to recover as quickly as possible. After a full 3 years, he finally recovered a little. He stopped and began to think. How did Frenzy find me? I've already erased the imprint it left in my body. If it could still find me, why didn't it appear after traveling through the void so many times? This time, it's such a coincidence. It's practically ambushing me in the void. Could it be that someone leaked the secret? Ling Han was shocked. If that was not the case, how could there be such a coincidence? But who leaked the secret? One had to know that there were still over 100 spies in the fiery frost plane. Could it be one of them? However, not many people knew that he was going to battle this time. Aside from the Empress and her daughters, the Rain Emperor, the Black Donkey, and the Heavenly Venerate knew, as well as his comrades like White Rice, Fu Yuan, and Xian Feng. Then there were the 3 main commanders, Lin Yu Lian, Xan Chihu, and Wu Haoyang. If Ling Han wanted to do something on the battlefield, he definitely had to report it. If there were spies, then they were among these people. Ling Han immediately eliminated the Empress, the Black Donkey, and the others. They had come all the way with him, and he had absolute trust in them. Then they were among White Rice, Fu Yuan, Xian Feng, Lin Yu Lian, Xan Chihu, and Wu Haoyang. However, Lin Yu Lian, the 3 greatest prides of eternity, and White Rice were all descendants of 7 steps, so the possibility of them becoming Frenzy's subordinates was close to 0. Of course, he could not eliminate the possibility that Xan Chihu had colluded with Frenzy to eliminate Ling Han. Thus, the most likely suspects were these 3, Xan Chihu, Fu Yuan, and Xian Feng. Ling Han did not want to suspect his comrades, so he was more inclined to believe that Xan Chihu had leaked the secret. In order to kill me, this person is really willing to do anything, even disregarding his bottom line, Ling Han thought. He continued to recover from his injuries, and after another few dozen years, he finally recovered. However, the destroyed dimension needed to be nurtured anew, and this was tens of millions of years of hard cultivation. He returned to the foreign battlefield, and before he could tell them what had happened, he received a huge piece of news. That group of lost ancient dimensions had changed. The Empress and the others had not left, and were waiting for Ling Han to return. What happened? Ling Han asked. We are not clear either, but it is said to be very shocking. Let's go take a look. Ling Han and the others also set out. Only a dozen or so years later, they once again came to this group of lost dimensions. There seems to be no change. Ling Han's eyes swept over. This place was still the same, but because the mines had been excavated, countless ruins were left, and it was a scene of desolation. Just as he finished saying this, a pillar of light rose from afar, breaking through the plane barrier, and causing the void to explode. Ling Han was instantly shocked. The energy in this pillar of light is too terrifying, at least reaching 6 steps. Could it be that this is an energy storm that rushed out from the 9th or 10th layer planes? Hunyo asked, tilting her head. Is that possible? The Empress nodded. Now that the ground here has been excavated, many tunnels have been formed, and it is not strange that an energy storm could pass through. A terrifying aura swept over, spreading for hundreds of millions of miles. It was more refreshing to read on a phone. Chapter 29-25. Ling Han, the Empress, and Hunyo all felt a tightness in their chests, and almost lost control of their power and fell from the sky. The three of them were all shocked. What a terrifying aura that could actually have such a terrifying effect on them. However, this aura only swept by for a moment before disappearing. Is this an anomaly? This aura is too terrifying. It's at least at the 6th step, but this is clearly a land of death. So where did a 6th step elite come from? Don't tell me there's a living 6th step elite buried underneath. Ling Han thought for a moment, shook his head, and said, that's not very possible. Senior Zhou and the others have already explored the 9th level, and all the raw stone veins should have been swept clean. It's impossible that there are any left. If there's a 6th step elite hiding in the 10th level, even Senior Zhou and the others can't pass through, then how could they have spread their aura out? The three of them looked at each other and had a bold guess. Don't tell me there's still a 7th step elite sleeping here, and now he's about to wake up. If this was true, then it would really be a big deal. 7th step was the strongest in the world, and they were indestructible and indestructible, although one died, and they didn't know how he was killed. If there really was a 7th step, then if he did evil, the entire origin world would suffer. They observed here, and found that after 67 days, the aura from before appeared again, and it was extremely terrifying. However, the next time, it was only 66 days before this aura appeared again. Then 65 days, 64 days, 63 days. The interval was getting shorter and shorter, which made Ling Han and the others even more uneasy. If this was an elite sleeping, then now the aura was getting more and more active, and the time of his awakening should be getting closer and closer. They went deep into the 8th level and observed from a close distance, but still could only feel the vastness and majesty of this aura, but still couldn't find the source. After a few days, they saw Zhou Heng and 3 other 6th step celestial venerables coming out from the 9th level. Senior Zhou. Ling Han hurriedly went up to greet them. Did you discover anything? The source comes from the 10th level, or even a lower level, Zhou Heng said solemnly. There's a high possibility that a 7th step expert is buried here. A living 7th step expert. Previously, when he had opened the ore, he had also obtained a 7 steps cultivator, but that was a corpse. Now, he had obtained a living 7 steps cultivator, so the meaning behind it was completely different. Brother Zhou, should we ask your master to come? Asked a 6th step expert to the side. He was Rong Tianyu, Lin Xiaoyang, and Zhou Heng's ally. Zhou Heng nodded. This matter is too important. Even if master doesn't come personally, he should at least send a clone. No one felt that this was exaggerated. It was too shocking that a new 7-step expert had appeared. More and more people came. Even Zhou Heng and the other 6 steps started to make arrangements and set up a formation here. If the newly emerged 7th-step cultivator had evil intentions, they would have to suppress him. Even if they couldn't kill him, they would have to seal him here forever. 6 steps was impossible. Therefore, Lin Luo, Bai Fan, Xen Fu, and the rest of the 7 steps each sent out a clone. Almost all the celestial venerables in the primordial world had gathered their powers. Frenzy, forget it for now. Under the plane's suppression, as long as a small number of troops remained, they would be able to resist. This place was too important. On the 13th day, on the 12th day, that aura appeared more and more frequently. In the end, it appeared several times in a single day. The ground began to tremble as if all the planes were about to collapse. The 7th-step expert had such power. It's about to appear, Zhou Heng muttered, his brows furrowed. Although there were as many as 76-step experts here and at least 5 7-step experts clones, they might not be able to suppress a true 7-step expert. No one was certain. The 7th-step expert was too powerful. After fusing 6 types of intrinsic powers, he was absolutely invincible. Only a 7th-step expert could contend against a 7th-step expert. This was an ironclad rule. Bang bang bang. When this aura moved like a normal person's breathing, a drum-like sound rang out, causing everyone's ears to hurt. Some people even started to bleed from their 7 orifices. One had to know that this was the 8th plane. Those who could come here were all at least 5th-step experts. Even such experts had been shaken to the point where they bled from their 7 orifices just because of a sound. It was too terrifying. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 5 figures appeared, their bodies emitting boundless light. It was impossible to see their appearances clearly. However, once they appeared, the sound of the drum immediately quieted down and could no longer cause any impact. These were the clones of the 5 7-step experts. Ling Han rubbed his nose. He was not bleeding from his 7 orifices, but he could not help but have a nosebleed. He could not help but be astonished. Even 7-step experts had been mobilized. Then, a 7-step supreme was really about to appear. Would this lost ancient plane's countless years of secrets be unraveled because of this? Bang! A pillar of light shot into the sky, and a terrifying aura instantly surged like a tide. The 5 7-step experts all took a few steps back, showing signs of being defeated. Could it be that this 7-step expert, who had yet to appear, was so powerful? Of course not, because these 5 supreme experts were only clones. No matter how powerful a clone was, how could it compare to the original body? A long sigh rang out in everyone's sea of consciousness. A long dream, ages pass. The mortal world returns, the era is like a dream. A figure slowly walked out from underground, calm and composed. However, when he appeared at the center of the crowd, no one could see his true appearance. His entire body was enveloped in boundless light, and even the vision of a 6-step expert could not see through it. What? You've brought out such a large force. Do you want to eliminate me? That person swept his gaze around and couldn't help but laugh loudly. His voice was like thunder, causing many people to stagger and be unable to stand steadily. This was a 7-step supreme. Too powerful. Just a laugh had such might. If he really attacked, how could a 6-step expert withstand it? How should I address you? Asked a clone of a 7th-step expert. He did not know who this person was. Right now, the 6th-step expert did not have the qualifications to speak and could only be a spectator at the side. I am. The newly born 7th-step expert laughed. He stretched out his hands, drawing upon the essence of heaven and earth. A smile appeared on his face. As expected, the void is not destroyed, and life is born from death. Sir, what exactly are your origins? Asked another clone of a 7th-step expert. Oh, if I don't tell you, are you going to force me? Laughed the newly emerged 7 steps. He didn't seem to mind at all. 7 steps, undying and indestructible. Even if he faced frenzy, he would not need to be afraid. Who would he need to give face to? Old friends, wake up. He shouted and slammed his palm against the ground. Rumble! It wasn't just this plane that was trembling. The 7th and 6th planes were also trembling. Furthermore, the tremors continued upward and then downward. Soon, the 9th, the 10th, and even further downward. In just a moment, 4 incomparably terrifying auras rose up. Chapter 29-26. The terrifying thing about a plane was its size. A single plane was enough to pin down tens of millions of celestial venerables of the same level at the same time. Otherwise, how could Ling Han single-handedly kill the enemy's leader in the midst of an army of 10,000? Not to mention him, even Lin Youlian and Xan Chihu couldn't do it. I only have 13 planes. What if I could have 130 or 1,300? Ling Han thought, and couldn't help but be fascinated. At that time, he would fall into the frenzy army's encirclement. He wouldn't need to escape into the void. He just needed to release a plane projection, and these monsters could only be suppressed. If the projection was like this, what about the plane itself? How many times more powerful would it be? This couldn't be easily tried, because if the projection was destroyed, it would take a few months or a few years before it could be used again. But the plane was different. This was the foundation, and if the foundation was gone, there would be a second time. So, this is my trump card, and I won't use it unless I have no other choice. Ling Han said in his heart. On the other hand, I have to improve my cultivation as soon as possible, and raise the limit of the plane I can accommodate. He was about to tear open the void and return, but he suddenly felt an extreme sense of unease. Whoosh, in the void, he saw a whip shadow lashing over. It was Frenzy. This still wasn't Frenzy's main body, but it gave Ling Han an unreal feeling, oppressing him so much that he had difficulty breathing. He suddenly had a feeling that this was Frenzy using the plane power to oppress him. One had to know that Frenzy wasn't only the strongest in the world, but also a plane. If Ling Han could use plane projection to oppress people, why couldn't Frenzy? Not only could it, but it could even do better than Ling Han, 100 times, 1,000 times better. The two weren't on the same level at all. Although it looked like a whip shadow lashing over, it had a plane projection, which was equivalent to a super high-level plane suppressing him. What kind of concept was this? Although Frenzy had attacked him in the past, it actually didn't have killing intent, and the goal was just to awaken him. But this attack was completely different, and it was to kill him. Obviously, Frenzy didn't have the idea of saving him. Since he had betrayed him, then he wouldn't hesitate to erase him. When the strongest in the world attacked, even if it was just a clone, who could stop it? At least 6 steps. The 13 planes in his body all shot out, forming a shield in front of him. Planar projections could even affect 5th-step experts, but now, not only had 13 planar projections appeared, but they were also planar projections themselves. Their power had increased by at least 10 times, and the shield they formed should be impregnable. Peng, peng, peng. However, this wild attack instantly caused the 13 planes to explode, but it only managed to delay them for a brief moment. This bought a moment for Ling Han, but it also caused him to vomit blood and the plane to collapse. As the main body, he was naturally affected, but he did not stop. He used this moment to tear open the space and return to the original world. Wah! He began to vomit large mouthfuls of blood, and his face instantly became pale. He lay on the ground, not wanting to move at all. The plane that he had painstakingly nurtured was destroyed. This was too hurtful. He looked inside his body. Fortunately, although the plane had been destroyed, there was still a trace of remnant power left. This could allow him to slowly nurture the plane again, but he would have to start from the beginning again. His thousands of years of hard work had been completely wasted. Damn it! Ling Han sat cross-legged and took out a great medicine. This was a restorative medicine. This place was still the same, but because the mines had been excavated, countless ruins were left behind, and it was a scene of desolation. Peng Yi had just finished saying this when he saw a pillar of light rise from afar, breaking through the dimensional barrier and causing the void to explode. Ling Han was instantly shocked. The energy of this pillar of light is too terrifying, at least reaching 6 steps. Could it be that this is an energy storm that rushed out from the 9th or 10th layer planes? Hunyo asked, tilting her head. Is that possible? The Empress nodded. Now that the ground here has been excavated, many tunnels have been formed, and it is not rare for an energy storm to pass through. 1. A terrifying aura swept over, spreading for millions and millions of miles. Audiobook 2929967. It was more refreshing to read on one's phone. Chapter 2928. There was actually another world before their world. If it wasn't for the tens of thousands of newly born immortal kings, everyone would think that they were dreaming. Follow me, Zhou Heng said to Feng Wuding and the other immortal kings from the previous origin world. No, it's better to come with me. Another sixth step expert stood up. Go to me. I will use endless resources to nurture you. Could it be that my side is lacking? Asked another sixth step expert. What was the most important thing in this world? Top experts and newcomers with endless potential. These tens of thousands of people came from the previous origin world. To be chosen, all of them were geniuses among geniuses. Not all of them could reach the 7th step, but reaching the 5th step shouldn't be a problem. Especially Feng Wuding. He was the strongest genius of the previous origin world and had even obtained the inheritance of the origin world. In the future, he might even surpass the 7th step. How important was this? Any force that could obtain these geniuses would definitely become the strongest force in the entire origin world in the future. Therefore, even the 6th step experts didn't care and jumped out to snatch these people. One after another, the 6th step experts showed their sincerity and extended their olive branches. This caused the other immortal kings to be moved. A 6th step expert, regardless of whether it was in this world or the previous one, they were already close to the peak. Hence, they all made their choice. However, the most eye-catching Feng Wuding still didn't say anything. It wasn't that no one invited him. On the contrary, an ancient heaven's pride like him was naturally being fought over. However, he maintained his stance and didn't make a choice easily. Obviously, he was waiting for the best offer and wanted to see which side had better conditions. However, Lin Xiaoyang, Zhou Heng, and Chu Hao didn't participate in this fight. Although a force needed fresh blood, this wasn't suitable for a 7th-step force. Because a 7th-step force would never have to worry about withering one day. For example, Lin Luo could oversee the ancient world. Even if the origin world was destroyed, he would most likely continue to live. Why would he need fresh blood? Moreover, Zhou Heng, Chu Hao, and even Lin Yulian could cultivate to the 7th step. This sect was too glorious and didn't need to waste so much effort. In the end, Feng Wuding joined Yu Borong's World Alliance. Ling Han was taken aback. Yu Borong had a grudge with him for killing his son. Would Feng Wuding meet him in the future? He couldn't help but be filled with anticipation. He really wanted to see just how strong this son of destiny's combat strength was. After dividing up the people, all the heavenly venerables returned to the extraterritorial battlefield to deal with the frenzy. Ling Han returned to his daily routine. If he wasn't cultivating, he would be fighting on the battlefield. He had the intention to carry out another operation to find out who was the spy by his side. But he didn't dare to take the risk. What if he was ambushed by frenzy this time? He couldn't guarantee that he would be able to escape. However, as long as he didn't find the spy, he wouldn't be able to rest easy. Because they had just returned to the Fire Frost dimension, with the suppression of the dimension's power, they should be able to get about 200 to 300 million years of breathing space. Everyone made use of this time to cultivate. The prodigies of the previous generation of the origin world were indeed extraordinary. After just over 10 million years, over 1,000 heavenly venerables had emerged from among them, but what was unexpected was that Feng Wuding was actually only a pseudo-heavenly venerable. Chapter 2929. Although Ling Han was hated by many, everyone had to admit that he was extremely freakish. He possessed the battle prowess of a 5th-level elite when he was only at the 3rd step, and he could move about freely in the chaotic barracks, killing countless enemies. Feng Wuding was a prodigy from the previous origin world, and he had even obtained the inheritance of that origin world. Although no one knew what this so-called inheritance was, Feng Wuding was definitely extremely powerful. He could rival a 5th-level elite when he was only at the 3rd step, which was enough to prove that he was no weaker than Ling Han. Previously, the two of them were already in a state of mutual hostility, provoking each other from afar. It was likely that the first thing Feng Wuding did after arriving at the foreign battlefield was to challenge Ling Han to prove that he was the strongest prodigy in history. Unexpectedly, although Feng Wuding had already been at the barracks for 3 days, he had no intention of challenging Ling Han. This caused everyone to be dumbfounded. What was going on? However, someone guessed Feng Wuding's thoughts and said, "This must be Feng Wuding's doing this on purpose. He doesn't take Ling Han seriously, and he disdains to challenge him." Was that really the case? Ling Han, that brat looks down on you so much, and you can tolerate this? The large black dog ran over to look for Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "So what? I'll go and challenge him." Of course. The large black dog nodded and said, "That brat is so arrogant, so how can I not teach him a lesson?" Ling Han shook his head and said, "He's doing this on purpose. He wants to raise his status, so why should I help him?" The large black dog thought about it and agreed. Ling Han's reputation had been forged through battles, and it had already been publicly acknowledged by everyone. Meanwhile, although Feng Wuding's starting point was very high, he didn't have any astonishing battle achievements, after all. If Ling Han went to challenge him first, then he would be able to make use of this opportunity to increase his reputation by a large margin. So shameless. He actually wants to use my little Han to raise his status like this. No, Grandpa Dog is going to curse them. The large black dog ran away angrily. The two great geniuses hadn't fought, but there were many small conflicts between the Ling Alliance and the World Alliance. No matter if it was in the foreign battlefields or the Xuanma Plain, there had already been a few battles between the two sides, with both sides winning and losing. Feng Wuding was really able to keep his composure. He didn't make a move at all and maintained his posture. However, the conflict between the two forces became more and more intense. Not only did the frequency of the conflict increase, but the number of people involved also increased. It was only after one incident that Ling Han was finally enraged. Ling Shi and Fu Tianxing weren't in the extraterritorial battlefield. The husband and wife were in charge of expanding the territory of the Xuanma Plain. However, they were ambushed by the World Alliance, which caused them to suffer heavy injuries and almost didn't make it back. Family and friends were Ling Han's reverse scale. Previously, he had been willing to say anything and treated this conflict as a form of training for everyone. But now, the World Alliance had gone overboard. Ling Han? The Empress and Hu Niu both looked towards Ling Han. "Let's go." Ling Han stood up with a sullen face. "Where are you going?" "Heaven Alliance." The three of them walked out of the house and headed in the direction of the World Alliance. Though this was the extraterritorial battlefield, the various forces still divided their territories. You were here, I was there, and they usually minded their own business.